It was a Thursday night at Aurelio's, the kind of Manhattan fine dining establishment where the silence between courses cost more than the wine. The type of place where men in tailored suits came to sign deals that would never see daylight, and where every handshake sealed something that couldn't be written down. Cha Yong-sun was reviewing the merger documents when the sound of the entrance doors bursting open shattered the cathedral quiet of the restaurant. Not the sound of a VIP arrival, the sound of someone fleeing. Yong-sun's hand stilled over the contract. 10 years building the bridge between Seoul's underworld and New York's legitimate business world had taught him to recognize the difference between a disruption and a disaster. This wasn't a disruption. This was a disaster arriving at a full sprint. He didn't look up immediately. The Dragon of Seoul never reacted first. He set down his fountain pen, the one that had signed treaties and terminations, and let his coal-dark eyes drift toward the commotion. The tailored black Brioni suit, the Patek Philippe on his wrist, the neck tattoos rising just above his collar like smoke from a fire he'd spent a decade trying to extinguish. Everything about him radiated the kind of controlled power that made people step back without knowing why. But before he could stand, a child crashed through the carefully orchestrated silence. Not the kind of child who belonged in a place where appetizers cost $200. A little girl, maybe 7, so pale she looked like she'd been kept away from sunlight. Blonde hair tangled and unwashed. A pink dress that had once been nice, now wrinkled and stained, the hem torn. And her eyes wide, blue, and filled with the kind of fear that made Yong-sun's jaw tighten. She ran between the white-clothed tables, past the horrified stares of Manhattan's elite, past the waiters who moved to intercept her like she was a stray dog that had wandered in from the street. She was fast, desperate fast. The kind of speed that only comes from genuine terror. 2 of the restaurant's security personnel moved to block her path, but she ducked under reaching hands with practiced ease, like she'd spent her whole short life slipping through adult fingers. Then she ran straight toward Yong-sun's table, past his 2 bodyguards stationed near the bar. They didn't react in time because no one expects a threat to arrive in a pink dress and bare feet. 2 small hands, trembling but determined, seized the sleeve of his $15,000 suit. She looked up at him with eyes that had seen things no child should see and whispered in a voice scraped raw from crying, "Please pretend you're my dad." Cha Yong-sun froze. In 39 years of living, 20 of them spent as the iron ghost of Seoul's criminal underworld, no one had ever asked him to protect anything innocent. He was the man who had orchestrated the merger of 3 rival syndicates without firing a shot. The man whose name made prosecutors across 2 continents lose sleep. The man whose black Mercedes convoy made pedestrians cross to the other side of the street. The man who had climbed out of the blood-soaked gutters of Itaewon by being smarter, colder, and more ruthless than everyone else. This little girl, shaking, desperate, clinging to him like he was a lighthouse in a storm, was looking at him as if he were capable of goodness. Before you watch what happens next, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. If you believe that sometimes the only way to fight a demon is to unleash a dragon, hit that like button and subscribe because this story is about to show you what happens when a monster chooses to become a hero. Cha Yong-sun was seconds away from a toast that would change everything. 10 years of washing blood off his hands with expensive soap and Italian silk. 10 years of proving that the Dragon of Seoul could become something more than a monster with good taste. The merger documents sat before him, crisp and perfect. Vanguard Group's logo embossed in silver at the top. $1 billion, clean money, a legitimate future. Everything he'd ever wanted since the night he'd looked in the mirror and stopped recognizing the man staring back. Across the table, Martin Lawrence from Vanguard's legal team raised his champagne glass. To new partnerships. Yong-sun reached for his own glass. The crystal caught the chandelier light, refracting it into 1,000 small rainbows across the white tablecloth. He checked the exits, bad habit, good instinct. Then the entrance doors exploded open. Not the sound of a VIP arrival, the sound of someone fleeing. Yong-sun's hand stilled over his glass. The restaurant's cathedral quiet shattered like dropped china. Conversations died mid-sentence. Silverware stopped mid-cut. Every head in the room turned toward the commotion. A child burst through the carefully orchestrated silence. Not the kind of child who belonged in a place where appetizers cost $200. A little girl, maybe 7, so pale she looked like she'd been kept away from sunlight. Blonde hair tangled and unwashed. A pink dress that had once been nice, now wrinkled and stained, the hem torn. She ran between the white-clothed tables, past the horrified stares of Manhattan's elite, past the waiters who moved to intercept her like she was a stray dog that had wandered in from the street. She was fast, desperate fast. 2 of the restaurant's security personnel moved to block her path, but she ducked under reaching hands with practiced ease, like she'd spent her whole short life slipping through adult fingers. Then she ran straight toward Yongsun's table. His bodyguards moved, but not fast enough. No one expects a threat to arrive in a pink dress and bare feet. 2 small hands, trembling but determined, seized his wrist. She looked up at him with eyes that had seen things no child should see and whispered in a voice scraped raw from crying, "Please pretend you're my dad." Time stopped. Cha Yongsun had orchestrated the merger of 3 rival syndicates without firing a shot. He'd survived 2 assassination attempts and a federal investigation that lasted 6 years. He'd built an empire on the principle that fear was more efficient than violence. But nothing in 20 years of criminal enterprise had prepared him for this. A wolf recognizes another wolf, even in sheep's wool. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't confused. She was making a calculation. A 7-year-old girl had looked at the most dangerous man in the restaurant and decided he was safer than whatever she was running from. Yongsun looked down at where her hands gripped his wrist. Her knuckles were bone-white. Her whole body was trembling, and on her left wrist, just visible beneath the sleeve of her dress, were bruises. Not the kind a child gets from playground falls. These were finger-shaped, adult-sized, deliberate. The eyes never lie, even when the mouth is smiling. "What's your name?" His voice came out quieter than he'd intended. "Delphine," she pressed closer. "Please, he's coming." Before Yongsun could ask who, a man appeared at the entrance. Gray suit, expensive but not showy. The kind of perfectly tailored anonymity that screamed corporate power. Silver hair swept back, wedding ring catching the light, and a smile, professional, warm, concerned. Jeffrey Hopkins. Yongsun recognized him immediately from the pre-negotiation dinner 2 weeks ago. Vice President of Risk Management for Vanguard Group. The man whose signature was on half the merger documents currently sitting on the table. Hopkins scanned the restaurant with practiced efficiency, and when his eyes landed on Delphine, his expression shifted to relief. Perfect, rehearsed relief. He began walking toward their table, and Yongsun felt Delphine's grip tight until her fingernails dug through his sleeve into his skin. She didn't scream. She just squeezed his hand so hard her knuckles turned white. "Mr. Cha, I am so sorry for this disruption." Hopkins arrived at the table, slightly breathless, that concerned father's smile never wavering. "Delphine, sweetheart, you can't just run off like that. You scared Daddy half to death." The word Daddy landed wrong, like a note played off-key in a symphony. Yongsun had sat across from killers, federal agents, men who'd sell their mothers for the right price. He knew what a lie looked like when it was wearing a smile. His smile was perfect, too perfect. "This is your daughter." Yongsun kept his voice neutral, but his hand, the one that had broken bones and signed death warrants, slowly moved to rest on the table near Delphine's, a wall between her and Hopkins. "Yes, I'm terribly sorry. She's been having these episodes lately. The therapist says it's anxiety related to the divorce. She gets overwhelmed and runs." Hopkins reached out his hand toward Delphine. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's get you home. Your mother is worried sick." Delphine pressed against Yongsun's leg, trembling so hard he felt it through his trousers. "My mother's dead," she whispered, so quiet only Yongsun could hear. Silence is the loudest sound in the world. Yongsun's eyes cut back to Hopkins. The man's smile hadn't wavered, still perfect, still warm, still absolutely wrong. "She's confused," Hopkins said smoothly. "The medication makes her say things. Come on, Delphine, we need to go now." The last word carried weight, not a father's patience, An order from someone used to being obeyed. Lawrence cleared his throat awkwardly across the table. Perhaps we should reschedule. No need. Hopkins' smile widened, but his eyes had gone flat. This will only take a moment. He took a step closer. Delphine's breathing went shallow and fast, and Yongsun saw it, the flash of something in Hopkins' jacket. Not a phone. The angular shape of something holstered beneath expensive fabric. Fathers don't carry silencers. Yongsun knew that grip. It was the grip of someone drowning. The restaurant around them had gone silent. Every diner watching the scene unfold like it was dinner theater they hadn't ordered. Yongsun's 2 bodyguards had moved closer, hands drifting toward concealed weapons. Hopkins' smile never wavered, but 2 men in dark suits had appeared near the entrance, spreading out with military precision. This wasn't a father collecting a runaway daughter. This was an extraction. Yongsun had exactly 3 seconds to make a decision that would destroy everything he'd spent a decade building. The merger documents sat in front of him. $1 billion, legitimacy, a clean slate, everything he'd wanted. The little girl's hand was still gripping his wrist, trembling like a bird's heart. And Cha Yongsun realized something he'd been trying to ignore for 20 years. Some stains don't wash off with expensive wine and Italian suits. He stood up, slowly, deliberately, the way a predator stands when it's decided to stop pretending to be civilized. Mr. Hopkins, his voice carried across the silent restaurant with the weight of someone who just made a choice he couldn't take back. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Hopkins' smile finally cracked, just slightly. I'm sorry. This is my table, my guest. Yongsun's hand moved to rest on Delphine's shoulder, protective, possessive, a statement written in body language that everyone in the room understood. And you're making her uncomfortable. There are no innocent men in this room, except her. Hopkins' mask slipped for just a second. Calculation flickered behind his eyes. He glanced at the merger documents on the table, at Lawrence's horrified expression, at the billion-dollar deal that was evaporating in real time. Then the smile came back, harder now, colder. Mr. Cha, I don't think you understand the situation. I understand perfectly. Yongsun's voice dropped to the register that made grown men reconsider their life choices. The child stays with me. You leave, now. Hopkins didn't move. You're making a very expensive mistake. I've made worse. The air between them turned to ice. The entire restaurant held its breath. Lawrence was frantically texting someone under the table. The bodyguards on both sides had their hands inside their jackets now, fingers on triggers. One wrong word, and Aurelio's would become a crime scene. Hopkins stared at Yongsun for 5 long seconds. Then his smile returned, but this time it was the smile of someone who just made a different kind of calculation. Keep her then, he straightened his tie. But when you find out what she's carrying, you'll wish you'd given her back. The restaurant erupted in whispered chaos. Lawrence stood up, gathering the merger documents with shaking hands. Mr. Cha, I'm going to have to report this to the board. I'm sorry, but... I know. Yongsun didn't look at him. He was watching Delphine, who was still gripping his wrist like a lifeline. Lawrence left without another word. The billion-dollar deal left with him. Yongsun looked down at the little girl, whose hand had just destroyed his future. What did he mean? What you're carrying? Delphine reached up and touched a silver locket around her neck with her free hand. Her blue eyes met his, ancient with knowledge no child should have. The reason they want me dead. The restaurant held its breath like a diver underwater, waiting to see if the surface would break. Yongsun stood there, Delphine pressed against his leg, Hopkins 5 feet away with that perfect corporate smile frozen on his face. Every eye in Aurelio's was locked on their table. Mr. Hopkins, his voice carried across the silent restaurant, smooth as aged whiskey. Please join us. It seems we have a situation that requires discussion. Hopkins' smile tightened. I don't think that's necessary. I insist. Yongsun gestured to the empty chair across from him with the casual authority of someone used to being obeyed. After all, we're civilized men. Surely we can resolve this misunderstanding over a glass of wine. The word civilized hung in the air like a challenge. Civilization is just a thin layer of ice over a deep ocean of violence. Hopkins hesitated. Yongsun could see the gears turning, walk away and lose face in front of Manhattan's elite, or sit down and try to salvage the situation. The corporate fixers' training went out. Hopkins gestured to his 2 men by the entrance to stand down, then moved to the chair Yongsun had indicated. Of course, Hopkins sat, smoothing his tie. Though I'm not sure what there is to discuss. Delphine is my daughter and she needs to come home. Interesting. Yongsun settled back into his own chair, moving with deliberate slowness. Delphine immediately pressed closer, her small hand still death-gripping his wrist under the table. He could feel her pulse hammering against his skin, rapid, terrified, the heartbeat of prey. Because the young lady just told me her mother is dead. Curious thing for a child to forget, don't you think? Hopkins didn't blink. As I said, she's been having episodes, the therapist. What's the therapist's name? The question came fast, sharp. Hopkins paused for half a second, barely noticeable unless you'd spent 20 years reading lies across negotiation tables. Dr. Morrison, at the Children's Psychiatric Center on. And her mother's name, Yongsun leaned forward slightly. Your ex-wife, what was her name? Another microsecond of hesitation. Catherine Hopkins. Under the table, Delphine's grip tightened so hard her nails broke skin through his sleeve. Yongsun poured wine from the bottle on the table, filling Hopkins' glass with practiced elegance. The Chateau Margaux cost $4,000, blood red and perfect. He poured slowly, watching the liquid catch the candlelight. Yongsun poured the wine, but he was measuring the distance to the man's throat. 6 feet, maybe 5.5 if Hopkins leaned forward to reach for his glass. Close enough. Tell me, Mr. Hopkins, you don't mind if I call you Jeffrey? Yongsun slid the wine glass across the white tablecloth. How long have you and Catherine been divorced? 2 years. Hopkins reached for the glass, his movements controlled. It's been difficult on Delphine. Instability, you understand. I understand perfectly. Yongsun's hand moved to rest on the table, fingers drumming once. A signal. His 2 bodyguards by the bar shifted position, cutting off the angle to Hopkins' men at the entrance. I understand that a loving father would have called the police, not walked into a private restaurant with what appears to be. His eyes flicked to Hopkins' jacket, where the angular bulge was barely visible, private security. Hopkins' smile never wavered, but his eyes went flat. I have enemies in my line of work. Risk management for a corporation the size of Vanguard comes with complications. Of course, Yongsun lifted his own glass, swirling the wine. Though I have to wonder what kind of risk management requires. He paused, letting his gaze drop to Hopkins' jacket again. Where the fabric pulled slightly wrong, where the weight of something metal disturbed the drape of expensive tailoring. Insurance. The word landed like a knife on the table. Hopkins set down his wine glass with deliberate care. Mr. Cha, I think we're getting off track. Whatever Delphine has told you. She hasn't told me much. Yongsun's voice dropped lower. But what she has told me is interesting. She said you claimed to be a friend of her father's, not that you are her father. She said you told her you were taking her somewhere safe. She said you called her merchandise. Children misremember. Children also bruise. Yongsun reached down and gently lifted Delphine's wrist, showing the finger-shaped marks to Hopkins. These are, 3 days old, around the same time you said the divorce started affecting her. Pain is just information. Hopkins' mask cracked, just slightly. The concerned father expression shifted to something harder, more calculating. You're making this complicated, Mr. Cha. I prefer thorough. Yongsun released Delphine's wrist carefully, his hand moving to rest on her shoulder. Protective. She was trembling so hard now he could feel it through the fabric of his suit. See, Jeffrey, I've built my career on reading people, and right now you're reading wrong. Is that so? A father who's lost his child in Manhattan would be frantic, calling the police, calling her mother. You're none of those things. You're... Yang-sun tilted his head slightly, studying Hopkins like a specimen. Annoyed, like someone whose schedule has been disrupted, like an executive whose project hit a snag. Hopkins leaned back in his chair, abandoning the warm facade. When he spoke again, his voice was different, colder, more honest. Mr. Cha, I'm going to do you a courtesy because we're about to be business partners. Walk away from this. Right now. Give me the girl and we'll pretend this never happened. The merger continues. Everyone wins. Everyone. Everyone who matters. Yang-sun felt Delphine flinch at the words. She was pressed so close to his leg, now she might as well have been trying to climb inside his suit for safety. She was lighter than a rifle, but heavier to carry. You're asking me to hand over a terrified child to a man who carries a concealed weapon to a 5-star restaurant. Yang-sun's fingers moved again, barely perceptible. Another signal. His bodyguards closed in tighter. That's not courtesy, Jeffrey. That's a threat poorly disguised as a negotiation. Call it what you want. Hopkins' hand drifted toward his jacket. But this is the last time I ask nicely. Then ask again, less nicely. Yang-sun's voice went arctic. Because I need to see if you're stupid enough to draw a weapon in a room full of witnesses where half my organization is watching the exits. Hopkins' hand stilled. His eyes swept the restaurant, cataloging the faces. Yang-sun's 2 personal guards, 3 men at the bar who looked too alert to be casual diners. The kitchen doors, where a figure in chef's white stood too still to be cooking. You came prepared, Hopkins said quietly. I'm always prepared. You should see what I bring to hostile negotiations. For the first time, Hopkins' smile disappeared completely. Do you know what that girl is carrying? She mentioned something. Then you know this isn't about her. It's about what she has. Give me the locket and she can walk out of here. I give you my word. Yang-sun laughed, actually laughed. The sound cut through the tension like breaking glass. Your word, the same word you gave when you told her you were taking her somewhere safe. The same word you gave when you called her merchandise. You don't understand what you're interfering with. Then explain it to me. Yang-sun leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Explain why a vice president of risk management for Vanguard Group is hunting a 7-year-old girl through Manhattan with a silenced pistol. Because that's what you're carrying, isn't it, Jeffrey? Not a Glock, something smaller. A Walther, maybe. The kind that makes very little noise. Hopkins went very still. How did you? The weight distribution. The way you hold your right shoulder. The fact that you unconsciously adjusted it twice since sitting down. Yang-sun smiled, and this time it was pure predator. I've been shot at enough times to recognize a man who came prepared to shoot. Daddy doesn't carry a silencer, Mr. Hopkins. The color drained from Hopkins' face. Not much, but enough. Last chance, Hopkins said. Give me the girl and the locket, walk away, or... Or what? Yang-sun's hand moved to the steak knife beside his plate, casual, almost lazy. You'll start a firefight in Aurelio's, with your 2 men against my 5, with Manhattan's financial elite as witnesses, with cameras in every corner. He lifted the knife, examining it in the candlelight. Or were you planning something subtler, a sudden accident when I leave, a car that doesn't start, maybe I slip in the parking garage? Hopkins said nothing. That's what I thought. Yang-sun set the knife down with a soft click. See, Jeffrey, you came here expecting a businessman, someone who'd weigh the cost-benefit analysis and make the smart choice. Give you the girl, keep the billion-dollar deal, everyone goes home happy. That would be the intelligent. But here's your problem. Yang-sun's hand moved back to Delphine's shoulder, and his voice went cold enough to frost the wine glasses. I stopped being just a businessman 20 years ago. And the part of me you're looking at right now, the part that built an empire from the gutters of Seoul, that part knows exactly what you are. And what am I? A cleaner, a fixer, the kind of man corporations hire to make problems disappear quietly, the kind who uses words like risk management and collateral damage, the kind who looks at a 7-year-old girl and sees a loose end. The table went silent. Even Delphine had stopped trembling, sensing the shift in the air. Hopkins stared at Yongsun for a long moment. Then he stood, smoothing his jacket. "You're making a mistake you won't survive." "I've made worse. The merger is dead." "I know. Vanguard will destroy you." "They can try." Hopkins leaned down, his voice barely audible. "You have no idea what that locket contains. No idea who wants it. No idea what happens to people who get in the way." Yongsun met his eyes without blinking. "Then I guess I'll find out." Hopkins straightened, his corporate mask sliding back into place. "Enjoy your evening, Mr. Cha, what's left of it." He walked toward the exit, his 2 men falling in behind him. At the doorway, he stopped and looked back one last time. "When they come for you, and they will come, remember that I gave you a choice." Then he was gone. The restaurant erupted in hushed chaos. Lawrence practically ran from the table, merger documents clutched to his chest like a shield. Other diners began requesting their checks, suddenly desperate to leave before whatever was about to happen happened. Yongsun sat perfectly still, Delphine still pressed against his leg. The most dangerous place in New York was within arm's reach of Cha Yongsun. Finally, he looked down at her. "Show me the locket." With shaking hands, Delphine reached up and unclasped the silver chain around her neck. She held it out to him, a simple silver heart, tarnished with age. Yongsun took it carefully, feeling the weight. Too heavy for just silver. He found the catch and opened it. No photograph inside. Instead, a micro SD card, smaller than his fingernail, embedded where a picture should be. "What's on this?" Delphine's voice was barely a whisper. "Proof." "Proof of what?" She looked up at him, with eyes that had aged decades in 3 days. "That monsters wear suits too." The locket sat in Yongsun's palm, lighter than a bullet but infinitely more dangerous. Delphine pressed closer against his leg, trembling. Hopkins was gone, but his words hung in the air like smoke. "When they come for you, and they will come, remember that I gave you a choice." Yongsun closed his fist around the locket, the silver biting into his palm. 20 years of building legitimacy. 10 years of careful cultivation. $1 billion evaporating like morning fog. All for a child he'd met 3 minutes ago, and a piece of evidence he hadn't even examined yet. He should feel regret. He should feel doubt. Instead, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: clarity. The demon of Seoul was awake. "We're leaving." Yongsun stood, his hand still on Delphine's shoulder. His bodyguards moved immediately, closing ranks. He caught the eye of his lead man, "Jun, bring the car to the service entrance." 30 seconds. Jun nodded once and vanished toward the kitchen. Lawrence was already gone, probably calling Vanguard's legal team before he even reached his town car. The other diners were pretending not to stare while obviously starring, phones out, already texting their contacts about the Dragon of Seoul's very public disaster. But Yongsun wasn't looking at them. He was watching Hopkins through the restaurant's front windows. The man hadn't left. He stood on the sidewalk, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapidly. Even from inside, Yongsun could read his body language, the sharp gestures, the tension in his shoulders. Hopkins was calling in reinforcements. Blood washes off, regret stains forever. "Sir," his second bodyguard, Quan, appeared at his elbow. "Hopkins has 3 vehicles forming a perimeter, black SUVs, professional grade. They're boxing us in." Of course they were. Men like Hopkins didn't make threats they couldn't back up. "The service exit?" Yongsun asked quietly, still watching Hopkins through the glass. "Clear for now, but they'll realize." "They already know." Yongsun's jaw tightened. Hopkins had just looked up from his phone directly at him through the window. Their eyes met across 50 feet of glass and Manhattan evening air. Hopkins smiled, not the corporate smile from before, something colder, more honest. The smile of a man who just sprung a trap. Then Hopkins reached into his jacket. Yongsun moved before conscious thought. His hand snapped to the wine bottle on the table, the $4,000 Chateau Margaux, 3/4 full and heavy as a brick. He didn't think about the cost or the waste or the dozens of witnesses with their phones out recording every second. He thought about the distance to the door, the angle of approach, the 7-year-old girl whose pulse he could feel hammering against his leg. Time compressed. He didn't run. Kings don't run, they stride. Yongsun gripped the neck of the bottle, stepped toward Hopkins' approaching form. The man was already pushing back through the entrance, weapon half drawn under his jacket, and swung. Not at Hopkins, at the marble column 3 feet to the left. The bottle exploded against stone in a shower of glass and wine. Crystal shards fountained across the white marble floor. Red liquid splashed across tables, across horrified diners, across the pristine sanctuary of Manhattan's elite like arterial spray. The restaurant erupted in chaos. Screaming, chairs scraping back, the sound of crystal and china shattering as people scrambled away from the violence they'd only ever read about in newspapers. The restaurant was silent, then it was shattered. Hopkins burst through the entrance, his hand finally pulling the Walther from beneath his jacket. Yongsun was already moving. 20 years of trying to bury his past, but muscle memory doesn't forget. His body moved with the economy of violence learned in alleys where hesitation meant death. He closed the 5 feet between them in 2 strides, his hand snapping out in a precise strike to Hopkins' extended gun arm. The weapon clattered across the floor, skittering under a table where a socialite was screaming into her phone. Hopkins pivoted, faster than Yongsun expected, throwing a punch that would have connected with his temple if Yongsun hadn't been tracking the man's shoulder rotation. He slipped the blow by inches, felt the air displacement against his cheek. Corporate training, good training, but not street training. Yongsun's hand shot forward, fingers rigid, strike focused on the hollow of Hopkins' throat. Not hard enough to crush the windpipe, just hard enough to collapse it temporarily to silence the screaming that was about to come. His fingers connected. Hopkins' eyes went wide. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Just a desperate whistling gasp as his body's autonomic systems went haywire, trying to pull oxygen through a temporarily collapsed airway. He dropped to his knees, hands clutching his throat. Not dead, not dying, but incapacitated, silent. Civilization is just a thin layer of ice over a deep ocean of violence. Time, Yongsun said quietly. 15 seconds, Quan replied from behind him. Yongsun turned back to Delphine. She stood frozen where he'd left her, eyes wide, tiny body shaking. But she wasn't looking at Hopkins gasping on the floor. She was looking at Yongsun, at what he'd just become in front of her eyes. At the monster wearing a tailored suit. For a moment, he almost regretted it, almost. Then he saw the bruises on her wrist again, and the regret evaporated. We're leaving now, he extended his hand to her. Trust me. She hesitated, just for a second, long enough that he thought she might refuse, might run from him the way she'd run from Hopkins. Then her small hand slipped into his. They moved. Not running, Yongsun never ran, but striding with purpose toward the kitchen entrance, Quan and his other guard forming a protective triangle around them. Behind them, Hopkins was making horrible wheezing sounds as his throat slowly reopened. His 2 men were pushing through the panicked crowd, trying to reach their boss. But Yongsun was already through the kitchen doors. The kitchen staff scattered like birds. Chefs and dishwashers pressing themselves against stainless steel counters as the Dragon of Seoul walked through their domain trailing a child and 2 armed men. No one spoke. No one moved. They knew who he was, and they knew better than to interfere. The service exit burst open ahead of them. Jun stood there, one hand holding the door, the other inside his jacket where his weapon lived. Clear, 30 meters. They emerged into an alley that reeked of garbage and cooking oil. A black Mercedes S-Class sat idling 10 feet away, armored and anonymous. Another Mercedes behind it, identical. A third pulling up to block the alley entrance. Professional, practiced, the kind of extraction they'd rehearsed 100 times but never thought they'd need. Jun pulled open the rear door. Yongsun guided Delphine inside, following immediately. The door sealed with the heavy thunk of reinforced steel, bulletproof glass, run-flat tires, the kind of vehicle you used when you expected war. "Drive," Yongsun said. The convoy moved before the word finished leaving his mouth. They pulled out of the alley and onto the street in a smooth, practiced formation. The lead vehicle ran interference, the middle car, theirs, protected, the trailing vehicle covering their exit. He checked the exits, bad habit, good instinct. Yongsun looked back through the rear window. Hopkins' men were spilling out of the restaurant's front entrance, weapons drawn, faces twisted in fury. But they were too late. The convoy was already turning onto Fifth Avenue, blending into Manhattan traffic like sharks disappearing into deep water. Delphine sat pressed against the far door, as small as she could make herself, watching him, still deciding if she was safer or just differently endangered. "You hurt him," she whispered. "I stopped him." Yongsun loosened his tie with one hand, the other checking his phone. 17 missed calls already. The news was spreading faster than the convoy could move. "There's a difference. My mom used to say there's always a choice between violence and—" "Your mother was wrong." The words came out harder than he intended. He looked at Delphine, at her wide blue eyes, and forced his voice softer. "Sometimes there is no choice. Sometimes the only option is which direction you point the violence." "That's sad." "Yes." Jun's voice came from the front seat, tight with tension. "Sir, we have a problem." Yongsun looked up. Through the windshield, he could see what Jun meant. Police cars, 6 of them forming a roadblock 3 intersections ahead. Lights flashing, but no sirens. The kind of quiet efficiency that spoke of coordination, of someone making a phone call and getting an immediate response. "Hopkins called in favors," Quan muttered from the passenger seat. "NYPD brass has to be." "Can we go around?" Yongsun was already calculating routes, alternative exits, the distance to the warehouse district where he had safe houses. "Not without—" Jun checked his mirrors. More police cars were pulling in behind them, 3 blocks back. "Sir, they're boxing us in. This is coordinated. Someone with serious pull made a call." Silence filled the armored Mercedes. Delphine's voice came small and terrified from beside him. "Are they going to take me back?" A wolf recognizes another wolf, even in sheep's wool. Yongsun looked at the police roadblock ahead, then at the cars closing in behind, then at the child beside him, whose hand was gripping his sleeve again with that drowning person grip. He thought about Hopkins' words. "You have no idea who wants it. No idea what happens to people who get in the way." But he did know. He'd built an empire learning to read power structures, to understand who pulled which strings. If Hopkins could mobilize NYPD this fast, the corruption went deeper than one corporate fixer. This wasn't about Delphine. This was about what was in that locket. About people powerful enough to buy police commissioners. About monsters who wore badges as easily as they wore suits. Jun, Yongsun's voice went cold. "Alternative routes, all of them." "Sir, they're covering." "Then we don't use routes. We make our own." Jun met his eyes in the rearview mirror. A moment of understanding passed between them. This was it. The moment when legitimacy ended and survival began, when the expensive suits came off and the demon underneath showed its teeth. "The subway construction on Lexington," Jun said quietly. 3 blocks east, no barriers yet, we could. "Do it." The convoy swerved hard right, tires squealing, horns blaring. They cut across 2 lanes of traffic, jumped a curb, and plunged into the construction zone like wolves disappearing into forest. Behind them, sirens finally started wailing. The city was locking down. Every cop in Manhattan would be looking for them within the hour. Every camera, every informant. The full weight of New York's law enforcement apparatus mobilized by a single phone call from someone with enough money and power to rewrite the rules. Delphine pressed closer to him, trembling. "What's on that chip?" Yongsun asked. "The truth right now." She looked up at him with eyes too old for her face. Names, she whispered. The names of everyone who bought us. The convoy plunged into darkness, the construction tunnel swallowing them whole. Behind them, the sirens grew louder. And Cha Yong-sun realized that saving one child might require destroying everything he'd built. The most dangerous place in New York was within arm's reach of Cha Yong-sun. The question was, dangerous for whom? The safe house was in Queens, buried in a neighborhood where people knew better than to ask questions. 3 stories of faded brick that looked like every other building on the block. A dry cleaner on the ground floor, legitimate business, legitimate cover. The second floor was empty offices with dusty windows. The third floor was where men like Cha Yong-sun went when the world turned hostile. They'd abandoned the Merced's convoy 6 blocks away, switching to a nondescript Honda that Jun kept for exactly this kind of emergency. The kind of car that disappeared into traffic. The kind nobody remembered seeing. Now Yong-sun stood in a sparse apartment that smelled of old cigarettes and disinfectant, watching Delphine hover near the door like she was calculating escape routes. Smart girl. Sit, he said, gesturing to the worn couch. She didn't move, just stood there, arms wrapped around herself, eyes tracking every shadow. Yong-sun had seen that stance before, in war zones, in interrogation rooms, in the eyes of people who'd learned that sitting down meant being vulnerable, and being vulnerable meant being hurt. Silence is the loudest sound in the world. You're safe here, he tried. That's what he said. Her voice came out flat, dead. Mr. Hopkins, he said I'd be safe, then he locked me in a room with no windows. Fair point. Yong-sun moved to the kitchen, if you could call it that. A hot plate, a mini fridge, a sink that probably hadn't been cleaned since the last time someone needed to disappear. He opened cabinets, searching for something, anything a child could eat. Ramen, canned soup, a jar of instant coffee that looked older than Delphine. He checked the exits, bad habit, good instinct. Jun, he called toward the door where his bodyguard stood watch. We need food, real food, something a child can eat. Pizza, Jun suggested. Pizza, sandwiches, I don't care. Just, he looked back at Delphine, at how her collarbones jutted out beneath her dirty dress. Get a lot of it. Jun nodded and slipped out, leaving Quan stationed in the hallway. The door closed, the silence stretched. Delphine still hadn't moved from her spot by the entrance. Her eyes were locked on him, tracking every movement like he was a dangerous animal that might charge without warning. Which, he supposed, wasn't entirely inaccurate. When was the last time you ate? Yong-sun asked. She said nothing. Delphine, the food, when? Her jaw tightened, stubborn. Yesterday, maybe, I don't remember. Yesterday morning, or yesterday night. Does it matter? It does to me. She stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for something, ulterior motives, hidden traps, the catch that always came with kindness. Then, quietly, yesterday morning, cereal. Mr. Hopkins gave it to me before we got in the car. 24 hours, maybe more. No wonder she looked ready to collapse. Yong-sun moved to the couch, deliberately sitting on the opposite end, leaving space, creating distance, showing her she had room to breathe. Jun will be back in 10 minutes. You can eat then. But I need to know what's on that chip. I need to know what I'm protecting. You mean what you're dying for, Delphine said quietly. The kid was 7 years old and already understood the math of violence better than most adults. Maybe, Yong-sun conceded, so tell me why it's worth it. Delphine's hands moved to the locket around her neck. No, wait. He had the locket. She was touching the place where it used to rest, phantom sensation, old habit. I'm not saying anything until I eat. Delphine. I said, her voice cracked, the exhaustion finally bleeding through. I'm not saying anything until I eat. You want information, feed me first. That's the deal. A wolf recognizes another wolf, even in sheep's wool. She was negotiating. A 7-year-old child, terrified and starving, was negotiating the terms of her cooperation. Part of him wanted to push, to demand answers now while they still had time. But another part, the part that recognized the steel beneath her fear, respected it. "Okay," he said simply. "We eat first." Something shifted in her expression. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it. 15 minutes later, Jun returned with enough food to feed a small army. Pizza boxes, sandwiches, a bag of bagels, orange juice, water bottles. The kind of panic shopping you did when you had no idea what a child ate but knew she needed to eat something. Yongsun spread it across the small table, and Delphine's eyes went wide. "It's all for you," he said. "Eat whatever you want." She moved to the table like someone approaching a trap, slowly, testing each step. When she finally sat, she grabbed a slice of pizza and bit into it without bothering to put it on a plate. She ate like she was stealing time. Yongsun watched her inhale the first slice in less than a minute, then reach for a second, then a third, eating with the desperate efficiency of someone who'd learned that food was temporary, that it could be taken away at any moment, that you consumed what you could while you could. He'd seen that eating pattern before, in refugees, in prisoners, in children who'd survived things they shouldn't have survived. His chest tightened. Jun had brought sandwiches, turkey, cheese, lettuce wrapped in plastic. Yongsun unwrapped one, pulled out the knife he always carried, a traditional Korean blade, small but wickedly sharp, and started cutting the sandwich into smaller pieces. Delphine paused mid-bite, watching him. A killer cutting crusts off a sandwich. Yongsun looked at the blade in his hand, at the tattoos on his knuckles, at the way Delphine had stopped eating to watch him with wary eyes. He probably looked like every nightmare she'd had for the past 3 days. Slowly, carefully, he set the knife down, used his hands instead to tear the sandwich into child-sized portions. It wasn't as clean, wasn't as precise, but it was less threatening. "Here," he pushed the plate toward her, "in case you want something besides pizza." Delphine studied the sandwich pieces, then him, then slowly she reached for one. "Thank you," she whispered. Those 2 words hit harder than they should have. Pain is just information. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Yongsun picked at a slice of pizza he didn't want, watching Delphine work through half the food on the table. Color was returning to her cheeks. The trembling had stopped. Food was security. Food was safety. Food was proof that maybe, she wasn't about to be hurt again. Finally, she set down her 5th slice of pizza and looked at him. "Okay," she said quietly. "You fed me, so I'll tell you." Yongsun waited. "My real name is Delphine Martins. My mom's name was Catherine Martins, not Hopkins. She worked as a housekeeper for rich people in Manhattan." Delphine's voice went flat again, reciting facts. 3 months ago, she got a job working for someone important, really important. She wouldn't tell me who, but she said it was going to change everything. We were going to move to a better apartment. I was going to go to a better school. She picked at the crust of her pizza. But then she started acting weird, scared. She'd lock the doors at night, check the windows. She stopped letting me walk home from school alone. And one night, she gave me the locket. She said if anything happened to her, I had to keep it safe, that it was proof. "Proof of what?" Yongsun asked gently. "I don't know, she wouldn't tell me. She said I was safer not knowing." Delphine's eyes filled with tears. 3 days ago, she didn't come to pick me up from school. Instead, Mr. Hopkins came. He said my mom was in the hospital. He said he was a friend. He said he'd take me to see her. But he didn't. "No," the word came out broken. "He took me to a building, a nice building in Manhattan, but it wasn't a hospital. It was an office, and he locked me in a room, and I heard him on the phone talking to someone. He said," her voice cracked, "he said the package was secure, that they'd dispose of me after they retrieved the item." "I bit him," Delphine continued, fiercer now. "When he came to check on me, I bit his hand so hard I tasted blood. And when he dropped me, I ran. I ran as fast as I could. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran until I saw the restaurant, and I thought—" She looked at Yongsun with those 2 old eyes. "I thought maybe someone in there would be powerful enough to protect me." "Why me?" Yongsun asked. "There were a dozen tables, dozens of people." Because you looked like him. Like Hopkins. No, Delphine shook her head. Like my uncle, before he died. He had tattoos too, he was scary. Everyone was afraid of him, but he never hurt me. He was the only one who— She stopped, wiping her eyes. He was the only one who kept me safe from my stepdad, before the cancer killed him. Yongsun felt something crack in his chest. She'd looked at him and seen safety, seen protection, seen someone scary enough to fight off the monsters. She ate like she was stealing time. Hopkins called you cargo, Yongsun said carefully. What did he mean? Delphine went very still, set down her pizza. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm not cargo, she said, each word deliberate. Fierce. I'm not merchandise, I'm not a thing, that's what they do. That's what the people on that ship do. They buy children. They sell children. They call us cargo so they don't have to think about what they're really doing. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. The chip, Yongsun said slowly, it's evidence of a trafficking ring. Delphine looked at him with eyes that had seen hell and survived. My mom found it while cleaning. She copied everything onto that chip. Names, dates, transactions, proof that important people, really important people, were buying children from all over the world and making them disappear. Blood washes off, regret stains forever. Yongsun's hand curled into a fist. And Hopkins works for Vanguard Group, Delphine nodded. They run it, the whole thing. They hide it behind charity foundations and orphanages and adoption agencies. But it's all fake. They take kids nobody will miss and sell them to people who want to hurt them. The room spun. Vanguard Group, the company he'd been about to merge with. The company that would have legitimized his entire operation. The company whose money would have washed his hands clean. He'd been about to shake hands with child traffickers. He'd been about to join them. How many names are on that chip? Yongsun asked quietly. I don't know, my mom said dozens. Maybe hundreds, politicians, businessmen, judges, police. She said the rot went all the way to the top. That explained the roadblock. That explained how Hopkins had mobilized NYPD in minutes. That explained why a 7-year-old girl was worth more than $1 billion merger. She wasn't just a witness. She was carrying evidence that could bring down empires. Why didn't your mother go to the police? Yongsun asked. Delphine looked at him like he was stupid. Because half of them are on the list. Of course they were. Yongsun stood, packing to the window. Outside, queens sprawled in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Hopkins was mobilizing, calling in every favor, activating every asset, sending every hunter after the child who could destroy them all. And Yongsun had just put himself directly in the crosshairs. He thought about the merger, about 10 years of work evaporating, about the legitimate future he'd almost touched. Then he looked back at Delphine, sitting at the table with pizza sauce on her chin and eyes that had seen things that would give grown men nightmares. I'm not cargo, she whispered again, like she needed to keep saying it, like she needed to remind herself she was human. Yongsun crossed back to the table, knelt down so they were eye level. No, he said firmly. You're not. You're a person, and anyone who says otherwise is going to learn why they used to call me the Dragon of Seoul. Delphine searched his face. You believe me? Every word. You'll protect me, even though it means. She gestured vaguely at the window, at the city, at the war he'd just started. Even though. Why? The question hung in the air between them. Why would a criminal trying to go legitimate throw it all away for a child he'd met an hour ago? Yongsun thought about his sister, about the night he'd failed to protect her, about 20 years of blood and money and trying to wash stains that never quite came clean. Because someone has to, he said simply, and right now that someone is me. Delphine nodded slowly. Then, carefully, she reached out and took his hand, the same way she had in the restaurant, that drowning person grip. Okay, she whispered, I trust you. 3 words that weighed more than any contract he'd ever signed. Outside, a car drove slowly past the building, too slowly, tinted windows, the kind of slow that meant surveillance. Jun appeared in the doorway. "Sir, we have movement, 3 vehicles circling the block." They'd been found. The vehicles circled once, twice, then disappeared into the Queen's night like sharks retreating to deeper water. Testing defenses, counting exits, mapping the battlefield before the war began. Yongsun stood at the window, watching the taillights fade. Delphine had finally fallen asleep on the couch, curled into a ball so tight she looked like she was trying to disappear into herself. Exhaustion had won the battle against fear. Jun was stationed by the door. Quan had taken position on the fire escape, watching the alley. They were as secure as they could be in a safe house that 3 people now knew the location of. 3 people too many. "How long do we have?" Yongsun asked quietly. Jun checked his watch. "They'll wait for darkness, full darkness, maybe 3 hours. Then they'll come in force." "Yes, sir." Yongsun's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. 43 missed calls, 27 text messages. His organization was hemorrhaging, and everyone wanted to know why their boss had just detonated a billion-dollar deal to protect a random child. One name kept appearing in the notifications: Minho. His lieutenant, his right hand for 15 years, the man who'd helped him build the bridge between Seoul's underworld and New York's legitimate business world. The man who was currently calling for the 18th time. Yongsun answered, "Talk." Minho's voice came through tight with controlled fury. "Where are you?" "Safe." "Bullshit. Nowhere in this city is safe right now. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I have a general sense." "A general?" Minho's laugh was sharp enough to cut. "Hyung, the Vanguard deal is dead. Lawrence called the board. They're pulling out completely. Not renegotiating, not postponing. Dead." "I know." $1 billion, gone, just... Minho made a sound like air escaping a punctured tire. "And that's not even the worst part. Half our legitimate revenue streams run through companies that do business with Vanguard. They're already getting calls. Pressure from the top. Cut ties with Cha Yongsun or lose your contracts." Yongsun's jaw tightened. He'd expected retaliation, but not this fast. "How many have cut?" "3 in the last hour. 5 more are reviewing their options." Minho's voice dropped. "We're bleeding, Hyung, millions per hour. And for what? A child you don't know, a fight that isn't yours." "He didn't run. Kings don't run, they stride." "The fight became mine the moment she grabbed my hand," Yongsun said quietly. "That's not how business works." "This isn't business." "Then what is it?" Minho's frustration bled through the phone. "Charity, redemption. You trying to buy your way into heaven by destroying everything we built." Yongsun looked at Delphine sleeping on the couch, at the bruises on her wrist, at the way she still gripped the edge of the cushion even in sleep, like she expected to need to run at any moment. "She has evidence," he said. "Names, proof that Vanguard Group runs a trafficking ring. Children, Minho, they sell children." Silence on the other end. "Then, and that's our problem because..." The question landed like a physical blow. "Because we were about to merge with them," Yongsun said slowly. "Because our money would have been laundered through a child trafficking operation. Because..." "We're criminals, Hyung." Minho's voice went cold. "We've done worse, you've done worse. Don't pretend this is about morality." "Maybe it is." "Then you're a fool," Minho exhaled sharply. "Look, I get it. The kid got to you, reminded you of your sister or whatever psychological baggage you're carrying. But you need to think clearly. We hand her back, we salvage the deal, we survive. We keep her, we're dead within a week. It's simple math. A wolf recognizes another wolf, even in sheep's wool." "The answer is no," Yongsun said. "You haven't heard my proposal yet." "I don't need to. The answer is no." Minho's voice went dangerously quiet. "I'm coming to you. We'll discuss this in person." "How do you know where I am?" A pause too long. "Jun told me." Yongsun's eyes cut to Jun by the door. His bodyguard's expression didn't change, but he gave a microscopic shake of his head. "I didn't." "I'll send you the address," Minho continued. 1 hour, come alone or don't come at all." The line went dead. Yang-sun stared at his phone. The pieces were clicking together in his mind, forming a picture he didn't want to see. "He's lying," Jun said quietly from the doorway. "I didn't tell him anything." "I know." "So how does he know?" "He doesn't." Yang-sun set down his phone carefully. "He's fishing, trying to get me to reveal the location by reacting." "Or," Jun said slowly, "he already knows where we are." The temperature in the room dropped. Loyalty has a price tag. Yang-sun pulled up his phone's tracking app. Every member of his inner circle had it, a safety measure, a way to coordinate during emergencies. He found Minho's location. The dot pulsed on the screen, 3 blocks away, and closing. "He's here," Yang-sun said quietly. "He's been here the whole time." Jun's hand moved to his weapon. "Should I?" "No," Yang-sun held up a hand. "Let him come." "Sir, if he's compromised." "Then I need to hear it from him." 15 minutes later, footsteps echoed in the stairwell. Heavy, unhurried, the walk of someone who knew he was expected. The door opened. Minho stepped through. He looked exactly as he always did. Expensive suit, perfectly styled hair, the kind of polished professionalism that made investors comfortable and rivals nervous. But his eyes were different. Harder. The eyes of someone who'd already made a difficult decision and was now just following through. "Hi, Young," he said, nodding respectfully to Yang-sun. Then his gaze fell on Delphine sleeping on the couch. "So this is what $1 billion looks like." "Don't," Yang-sun warned. "Don't what? State facts?" Minho moved further into the room, his movements casual but calculated. "That child has cost us everything. The merger, our legitimate revenue streams, our political connections. Hopkins has half of NYPD looking for you. The FBI is asking questions. And our own people," he laughed bitterly. "Our own people are wondering if the dragon of Seoul has gone soft." "I made a choice." "You made a mistake." Minho pulled out his phone, setting it on the table between them. "But it's not too late to fix it." Yang-sun stared at the phone. "What are you doing?" "Saving us." Minho met his eyes. "I called Hopkins. Before I came here, I told him I could arrange a meeting. You, him, and the girl, clean exchange. We get immunity from prosecution and a renegotiated merger deal. They get their evidence back. Everyone walks away." The room went silent. Even the ambient noise of the city seemed to die. Jun's hand moved to his weapon. Kwan appeared in the doorway, alerted by the tension in the air. But Yang-sun didn't move. He just stared at Minho, at the man he'd trusted for 15 years, and watched their friendship disintegrate in real time. "You called Hopkins," Yang-sun said slowly, each word deliberate. "You told him where we are." "I told him I could arrange a meeting. There's a difference." Minho's voice stayed steady. "But yes, he knows we're in Queens. He doesn't know exactly where. Not yet. That's your leverage. You still have time to make the smart play." "The smart play." "Yes," Minho leaned forward. "Think about it, Hyung. Really think. What's your end game here? You keep the girl, you're at war with Vanguard. You're at war with half of NYPD. You're at war with people so powerful they buy judges like other people buy groceries. You'll be dead within a week. We'll all be dead." "Maybe." "There's no maybe about it." Minho's frustration bled through. "I've run the numbers. I've made the calls. There is no scenario where you win this fight. None. The best you can hope for is to die quickly instead of slowly. Pain is just information." "And the girl?" Yang-sun asked quietly. "What happens to her in your smart play?" Minho's expression went carefully blank. "That's not our problem." "It became our problem the moment she grabbed my hand." "No, it became your problem, your obsession, your suicide mission." Minho's voice hardened. "But I've spent 15 years building this organization alongside you. I've earned the right to protect it when you won't." "By selling out a child. By saving hundreds of soldiers. By protecting our families. By choosing the people who have bled for us over a stranger." Minho stood. "I'm not the villain here, Hyung. I'm the one making the hard choice you're too weak to make." "The phone call that would bleed the family dry." "When did you call him?" Yang-sun asked. Hopkins, when exactly did you make contact? Min-ho hesitated, just for a second. An hour ago. Before or after I answered your call? Another pause. Before. So when you called me, you'd already betrayed me. I'm trying to save you from yourself. Min-ho's composure cracked. You're throwing away everything for a child you don't know, a child who's carrying evidence that will destroy us all if it goes public. Don't you see? This isn't about right or wrong. It's about survival. There are no innocent men in this room, except her. Yang-sun stood slowly. The movement caught everyone's attention. Jun's hand tightened on his weapon. Quan moved closer. Even Delphine stirred on the couch, sensing the shift in atmosphere without waking. You're right, Yang-sun said quietly. This is about survival, but you're wrong about whose survival matters. Hyung. 15 years, Min-ho. 15 years I've trusted you, relied on you, built this empire with you. Yang-sun's voice stayed level, but something cold and final had entered it. And the first time I make a choice that costs money instead of making it, you sell me out. I'm protecting the family. By negotiating with child traffickers, by putting a price on a 7-year-old's life. Yang-sun moved closer, and Min-ho took an involuntary step back. Tell me, what was the number? What did Hopkins offer you to arrange this meeting? Immunity? Money? Your own cut of the renegotiated deal? Min-ho's silence was answer enough. The demon of Seoul was awake. Get out, Yang-sun said softly. Hyung, you need to listen. Get out, now, before I do something we'll both regret. Min-ho looked at the boss, then at the door. For a moment, Yang-sun thought he might stay, might try to argue further, might try to salvage a friendship that had just died in real time. But Min-ho was many things, ambitious, calculating, ruthless. He wasn't suicidal. He turned toward the exit, paused at the threshold. When Hopkins comes for you, and he will come, remember that I offered you a way out. When Hopkins comes, Yang-sun replied, remember that you told him where to look. Min-ho left without another word. His footsteps echoed down the stairwell, then silence. Jun moved to the window, watching. He's getting into a car, black sedan, tinted windows. Hopkins people, Yang-sun said quietly. Yes, sir, Jun turned back. Orders. Yang-sun looked at Delphine, still sleeping despite the tension that had filled the room, still gripping the couch cushion, still expecting to need to run. We move, he said. Now, before Min-ho finishes his debrief and they pinpoint our exact location. Move where? They'll have every safe house mapped by now. Then we don't go to a safe house. Yang-sun pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts he hadn't called in years. Names from the old days, from before he tried to go legitimate, from when the Dragon of Seoul lived in the shadows instead of boardrooms. We go hunting, he said. Jun's eyes widened slightly. Sir. Hopkins wants a meeting, he'll get one. Yang-sun's voice went cold. But it'll be on my terms, not his, and it'll be the last meeting he ever takes. Blood washes off, regret stains forever. He made 3 calls, short, clipped, using language he thought he'd left behind. When he finished, he turned back to Jun. Wake her up gently. We leave in 5 minutes. Where are we going? To call in debts from men who remember what I was before I tried to become something else. Yang-sun moved to the couch, kneeling beside Delphine. She woke slowly, groggily, terror flashing across her face until she remembered where she was. We have to move, he said gently. Can you walk? She nodded, sitting up. Are they coming? Yes. Will you give me back? Yang-sun met her eyes. Never. Something in his voice must have convinced her, because she took his offered hand without hesitation. They were moving toward the exit when Jun's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face went pale. Sir, we have a problem. Speak. Min-ho's car. It just exploded, 3 blocks from here. The room went silent. Exploded, Yang-sun repeated slowly. Yes, sir. Witnesses say it was sudden. No warning, the vehicle just... Jun made a gesture. Detonated. Yang Sun's mind raced through the implications. Hopkins' people had picked up Min-ho. Min-ho had gone willingly, expecting negotiation. And Hopkins had killed him anyway. He was never going to negotiate, Yang Sun said quietly. Hopkins, he used Min-ho to get our location, then eliminated him as a loose end. So he knows where we are. He knows where we were. Yang Sun picked up Delphine. And in about 2 minutes, this entire block will be swarming with people who want us dead. Move. They hit the stairs running. Behind them, through the windows, Yang Sun could see vehicles converging. Black SUVs, moving fast, no more surveillance, no more patience. The hunt had begun. And Cha Yang Sun realized that Min-ho's betrayal had just cost him more than loyalty. It had cost him time. They hit the ground floor running. Jun led, weapon drawn, checking corners with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this too many times. Quan brought up the rear, walking backwards, watching their six. Yang Sun carried Delphine, her arms wrapped tight around his neck, her face buried in his shoulder. She didn't ask questions. Smart girl. The dry cleaner's back entrance opened into an alley that smelled of rotting garbage and old cooking oil. Darkness pooled between the buildings like spilled ink. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed, cops or ambulances or both, racing toward the explosion that used to be Min-ho. Clear, Jun whispered, moving toward where they'd stashed the Honda. They made it 3 steps before the world exploded. Not literally, not like Min-ho's car, but close enough. Headlights flared at both ends of the alley, blinding and sudden. High beams cutting through darkness like surgical lights. Black SUVs blocking both exits, engines growling, doors already opening. Men poured out, 6, 8, 10, professional gear, body armor, the kind of weapons you didn't buy at sporting goods stores. Down! Jun shoved Yang Sun back toward the doorway as the first shots rang out. Bullets don't care about business deals. The brick wall above Yang Sun's head exploded in a shower of dust and fragments. He twisted, covering Delphine with his body, feeling her heart hammering against his chest like a trapped bird. Jun returned fire, 3-round bursts, professional and controlled. One of Hopkins' men went down, then another. But there were too many, and they had the high ground, the cover, the advantage. Back inside, Quan shouted, laying down suppressing fire as Yang Sun scrambled back through the door, Delphine clutched tight. They made it into the dry cleaner's back room, a maze of hanging plastic-wrapped suits and industrial pressing machines. The air smelled of chemicals and steam. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting everything in sick yellow-green. The roof, Jun was already moving, physically pushing Yang Sun toward the back stairs. Fire escape, we can. The front windows exploded inward. More gunfire, glass and metal and the screaming of ricochets. The pressed suits danced on their hangers like ghosts as bullets tore through them. Yang Sun ran, Delphine bouncing in his arms. His lungs burned. His legs screamed. 20 years behind a desk had cost him more conditioning than he'd realized, but fear was a hell of a motivator. They hit the stairs, narrow, steep, the kind of stairwell that made you understand why building fires killed more people than the flames themselves. Behind them, footsteps, heavy boots, professional pursuit, no shouting, no warnings, just the methodical hunt of men who'd done this before. Second floor, the empty offices, dust everywhere, old furniture, water damage staining the ceiling like Rorschach tests. Jun kicked open the door to the fire escape. And froze. Contact, he said quietly. Yang Sun looked past him, 3 more men on the fire escape, climbing up from below, boxing them in. A trap. Hopkins had planned this, waited until they were committed to the escape route, then closed the jaws. 3rd floor, Quan said, only option left. They pivoted, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Delphine's grip on Yang Sun's neck was so tight he could barely breathe. He could feel her trembling against him, could hear her trying not to cry. I've got you, he whispered. I've got you. The 3rd floor, the safe house, the place Min-ho had sold them out. The only thing colder than the wind was his brother's eyes. They burst through the door into the apartment. Jun immediately moved to barricade the entrance, shoving furniture against the door. Kwan went to the windows, checking sight lines, calculating defensive positions. How many? Yang-sun set Delphine down behind the couch. The safest position in the room. The place where bullets would have to go through the most material to reach her. 15, maybe 20. Jun's voice stayed calm, professional, but Yang-sun heard the subtext, we're dead. Ammunition. 3 magazines each, maybe 60 rounds total. Against 20 trained killers with body armor and military-grade weapons. The math wasn't complicated. Yang-sun pulled his own weapon, a Sig Sauer he'd carried for 15 years but hoped never to use again. He checked the chamber, checked the safety. Muscle memory from a life he'd tried to leave behind. We hold until, he stopped. Until what? Until police arrived. Half of NYPD was on Vanguard's payroll. Until reinforcements came. His organization was scattered, leaderless, probably already being dismantled by Hopkins' people. Until we can't, Jun finished quietly. Footsteps in the stairwell, multiple sets, moving fast but controlled. Combat spacing, tactical discipline. They're coming, Kwan said from his position by the window. Yang-sun moved to the couch, kneeling beside Delphine. She looked up at him with eyes that had already accepted what was about to happen. Stay down, he told her. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, stay behind this couch. They're going to kill you, she whispered. Maybe. Then they'll take me. No, Yang-sun gripped her shoulder. When Jun and I go down, Kwan will get you out. He knows places even I don't know. You trust him, you run, you don't look back. You find someone to give that chip to, someone clean, someone who can. The door exploded inward. Not from kicking, from a breaching charge. Controlled explosion that turned the barricade into shrapnel and smoke and chaos. Men poured through, 4, 6, moving with practiced coordination. Jun fired first, 3-round burst, center mass. One of Hopkins' men went down, body armor saving his life but not his consciousness. Kwan followed up, 2 shots, headshots, professional, 2 more bodies. But there were too many. They kept coming like a tide, overwhelming through sheer numbers. Yang-sun fired, covering Jun's reload, covering Kwan's position. Every bullet placed with 20 years of experience that his body hadn't forgotten even if his conscience wished it had. A wolf recognizes another wolf, even in sheep's wool. Then he saw Hopkins. The man stood in the doorway, behind his soldiers, wearing body armor over his corporate suit. The cognitive dissonance was stunning. Silver hair perfectly styled, expensive watch gleaming on his wrist, Kevlar vest strapped over Thomas Pink. Violence pretending to be civilized, or civilization pretending to be violent. Yang-sun couldn't tell the difference anymore. Hopkins pointed, not at Yang-sun, at Delphine. The girl, he said calmly. Alive, everyone else is expendable. 3 men pivoted, moving toward the couch where Delphine was hiding. Yang-sun didn't think, didn't calculate odds, just moved. He threw himself between the advancing soldiers and the couch, between the bullets and the child, between violence and innocence. The first round hit his shoulder. Pain exploded through him like lightning, white-hot and consuming. The impact spun him halfway around, blood already soaking through his suit jacket. But Yang-sun didn't fall. He straightened, raised his weapon with his left hand, fired twice. One of the advancing soldiers dropped, screaming, clutching his leg where the femoral artery was now painting the floor red. A second bullet hit Yang-sun's torso. The vest caught it, but the impact felt like being kicked by a horse. Ribs cracked, air evacuated his lungs. Still, he didn't fall. Yang-sun, Jun was shouting, laying down covering fire. Get down. But Yang-sun couldn't. Because the moment he went down, they'd have a clear shot at Delphine. So he stood there, bleeding, broken, a wall of flesh and bone between a child and men who saw her as merchandise. There are no innocent men in this room, except her. A third bullet grazed his neck. Blood sprayed hot and immediate. The world tilted. His vision tunneled. But his body, his stubborn, violent, unforgiving body, stayed upright through sheer willpower. He fired again, missed, fired again, hit. Hopkins' men were pulling back, regrouping. They hadn't expected this level of resistance. Hadn't expected a man to take 3 bullets and keep fighting. But Yongsun had been expecting it, had been preparing for it his entire life. Every scar, every lesson learned in blood, every moment of violence he tried to bury under expensive suits and legitimate business deals. All of it had been training for this exact moment. Hopkins stepped forward, weapon drawn, pointed directly at Yongsun's head. "Impressive," Hopkins said, "but pointless." Yongsun's vision was fading, black spots dancing at the edges, blood loss making his hands shake. He was dying, probably, but not yet, not quite yet. "Fuck you," Yongsun managed. Hopkins smiled. Nothing personal, just... The window exploded. Not from bullets, from a body. Someone had rappelled down from the roof and crashed through the glass in a shower of fragments and controlled chaos. More bodies followed. 4, 5, men in black tactical gear but with different insignia, not Hopkins' people. One of them, a man with Seoul tattoos visible on his neck, moved directly to Yongsun's position. "Boss," the voice was familiar. "We got the call." Yongsun blinked through the blood and pain, tried to focus, recognize the face. D-Young, one of the old guard, one of the men from before legitimacy, from when the dragon of Seoul actually breathed fire. "How?" Yongsun tried to speak, failed. His legs were giving out. "You called in the debts." D-Young caught him before he fell. "We came to pay them." The room erupted in gunfire again. But this time, Hopkins' people were caught in a crossfire. D-Young's team moved with brutal efficiency, clearing the room with the kind of violence that made professional soldiers look like amateurs. These weren't businessmen with guns. These were predators wearing human skin. Hopkins was already pulling back, screaming orders, trying to organize a retreat. His carefully orchestrated trap had turned into an ambush. "The girl," Yongsun whispered to D-Young. "Behind the couch, get her out." Already on it. Another of D-Young's men was gently lifting Delphine, who was crying now, reaching for Yongsun with desperate hands. "No, don't leave him, he's hurt." "I'm fine," Yongsun lied through blood-stained teeth. "Pain is just information." D-Young was applying pressure to Yongsun's shoulder, trying to slow the bleeding. "This is bad, boss. You need a hospital." "Can't, Hopkins owns hospitals." "Then we go underground. I know a doctor. Used to patch up Yakuza. No questions." Yongsun tried to nod. The world spun. He could feel his consciousness slipping away like water through cupped hands. But before the darkness took him, he locked eyes with Hopkins across the chaos of the firefight. The corporate fixer was bloodied, furious, already pulling back toward the exit, but he pointed at Yongsun one last time. A promise, this wasn't over. Yongsun tried to smile, probably looked more like a grimace, but the message was clear: come back, I'll be waiting. Then Jun was there, supporting his other side. Quan was clearing a path to the window. Delphine was still crying his name. "Move," De-Young commanded, "before they regroup." They dragged Yongsun toward the broken window, toward the fire escape, toward whatever came next. Below, sirens, multiple. The police were finally arriving, or pretending to. "You saved her," De-Young said as they navigated the metal stairs. "That's what matters." Yongsun looked at Delphine, being carried by one of De-Young's men. Safe, alive, still reaching for him with tear-stained hands. She was lighter than a rifle, but heavier to carry. "Yeah," Yongsun whispered, "I did." Then the darkness took him. When he woke, if he woke, Hopkins would be waiting. But so would he. The Dragon of Seoul wasn't dead. Just sleeping. And when he woke up, the entire city would remember why they'd feared him in the first place. Yongsun woke to the smell of antiseptic and blood. Not a hospital, The fluorescent lights were wrong, too dim, flickering at intervals that spoke of jury-rigged electrical work. The ceiling was unfinished concrete, water-stained and cracking, and the pain in his shoulder was a living thing, breathing fire with every heartbeat. Easy, a voice, accented, Korean, but the Seoul dialect filtered through decades abroad. You move too fast, you'll tear the stitches. Yongsun's vision swam into focus. An old man leaned over him, hands steady despite their age, finishing the last sutures on his shoulder. The man's face was weathered like old leather, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Dr. H. Wang, the ghost medic, the man who'd patched up half of Seoul's underworld before disappearing to New York 20 years ago. How bad? Yongsun's voice came out as gravel. You took 3 bullets, one through and through in the shoulder. One stopped by your vest but cracked 2 ribs. One grazed your neck 1/4 inch to the left and you'd be dead. H. Wang tied off the last stitch with practiced efficiency. You'll live, but you'll hurt like hell for a month. Delphine. The girl, safe, in the next room with Young's men, scared but unharmed. Relief flooded through Yongsun, stronger than any painkiller. He tried to sit up. The world tilted violently. I said easy. H. Wang pushed him back down. You lost a lot of blood. Your body needs time. Don't have time. Yongsun gritted his teeth, forcing himself upright despite the nausea. Hopkins is still out there. He'll regroup, come back stronger. Then you're lucky he'll find a dead man. H. Wang gestured to the blood-soaked clothes in the corner. I had Young spread word that you didn't make it. That the Dragon of Seoul bled out in a queen's safe house. Let Hopkins think he won. He checked the exits. Bad habit, good instinct. Yongsun scanned the room. They were in a basement, old, converted into a makeshift surgical suite, medical equipment that looked military surplus, supplies that spoke of treating gunshot wounds and stab injuries, not common illnesses. The kind of place you came when going to a real hospital meant answering questions you couldn't afford to answer. Where are we? Chinatown, sublevel of a restaurant I own, or used to own. I'm retired. H. Wang cleaned his instruments with methodical precision, until Young called in a 20-year-old favor. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I saw the news. H. Wang's expression darkened. NYPD is calling it a gang war. They found Minho's body, or what was left of it. They're saying you murdered him when he tried to stop you from kidnapping a child. The world inverted itself. They're saying I kidnapped. Yongsun's laugh turned into a cough that sent lightning through his ribs. Hopkins is rewriting history. Hopkins has the media, the police, the narrative. H. Wang set down his instruments. As of 3 hours ago, Cha Yongsun is a wanted fugitive. Murder, kidnapping, destruction of property. They're offering a reward. $500,000 for information leading to your capture. Blood washes off. Regret stains forever. Then we're dead. Yongsun leaned his head back against the wall. Can't hide in New York when everyone's looking for us. Maybe, maybe not. A small voice from the doorway. Delphine stood there, still wearing the pink dress, now stained with dirt and blood that wasn't hers. Young loomed behind her, protective but keeping distance. You're awake, she whispered. Apparently, Yongsun tried to smile, failed. You okay? You got shot 3 times because of me. I got shot 3 times because of Hopkins. There's a difference. Delphine moved closer, her small hand reaching for his, the same grip as before, the drowning person grip. The men who came, Young, they said you're famous, that people used to be afraid of you. They weren't wrong. But you saved me anyway, even though it cost everything. Yeah, Yongsun said quietly, I did. A wolf recognizes another wolf, even in sheep's wool. Then I need to show you something. Delphine pulled the locket from around her neck, the one Yongsun had returned to her before the firefight. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing the micro SD card inside. My mom said if anything happened to her, I needed to get this to someone who could stop them, someone powerful enough to fight back. Your mom was optimistic about humanity. She was wrong about a lot of things. Delphine held out the locket. But maybe she was right about you. Yang-sun took the locket carefully, his fingers clumsy with pain and bandages. The chip was smaller than his fingernail. Innocuous. The kind of thing you could lose in a couch cushion or accidentally throw away. The chip was small. The sin was infinite. D-Young, Yang-sun called. I need a laptop, something secure, air-gapped. Already here. D-Young produced a battered laptop from a bag by the door. Wiped clean, no network connection. Whatever's on that chip stays on that chip. Yang-sun inserted the SD card with shaking hands. The laptop took a moment to recognize it. Then folders appeared, dozens of them, organized by date, by location, by transaction number. He opened the first one. Video files, hundreds of them. He clicked on one at random. The footage was grainy, clearly from a hidden camera. It showed a room, sterile, institutional, the kind of place that called itself a facility instead of a prison. Rows of beds, small figures in each one. Children, ranging from maybe 5 to 15 years old. A man in a suit walked through the room, clipboard in hand, inspecting the children like livestock, speaking to someone off camera. 20 units ready for delivery, ages 5 to 12, all documentation complete, medical screenings current. The clients are very pleased with the quality. Yang-sun's hand moved to close the laptop. He'd seen enough, but Delphine reached out, stopping him. You need to see it all, she said quietly. You need to understand what they are. So Yang-sun watched. File after file, room after room, children being catalogued, numbered, sorted by age and appearance, spoke about in clinical terms, inventory, merchandise, units, transported in unmarked vans to private airfields, handed over to people whose faces were carefully kept out of frame. But their voices were clear. Their names were mentioned, titles, positions, the kind of people who appeared on magazine covers and gave speeches about charity. One folder was labeled Vanguard Corporate Structure. Inside were documents, financial records, shell companies, tax shelters, a network of foundations and orphanages spanning 12 countries, all legitimate on paper, all hiding the same thing underneath. A factory for human trafficking, disguised as humanitarian work. The monster wasn't the man with the tattoos. Your mother found this, Yang-sun said quietly, while cleaning. She worked in the Vanguard corporate offices, executive floor. Delphine's voice stayed steady, but tears ran down her face. She saw one of the executives, Mr. Hopkins, putting papers through a shredder late one night. After he left, she went through his trash, found a receipt, something about a delivery to an address in Queens. She investigated. She followed him, found the facility, got inside by pretending to be from social services. Delphine wiped her eyes. She recorded everything, took pictures, copied files. She was going to go to the FBI, but then she realized. Some of them were on the list, Yang-sun finished. Delphine nodded. She didn't know who to trust, so she made the chip, gave it to me, said if anything happened, I should run, find someone powerful, someone who could fight them. Silence filled the basement. H. Wang had stopped cleaning his instruments. Di-Young stood motionless in the doorway. Even the ambient noise of Chinatown seemed to fade, leaving only the weight of what they'd just witnessed. Yang-sun opened another folder. This one was labeled Client Database. Names, addresses, purchase histories, photos of children beside photos of their buyers. Politicians, business executives, entertainment moguls, foreign dignitaries, a judge, 3 senators, a name Yang-sun recognized from tech billionaire lists. All of them documented, all of them guilty, all of them protected by money and power and the kind of systemic corruption that made law enforcement a joke. How many? Yang-sun asked. Names, 347. Delphine had the number memorized. Children sold, over 2,000 going back 15 years. 2,000 children. 2,000 lives stolen, sold, destroyed. For profit. There are no innocent men in this room, except her. Yang-sun closed the laptop carefully. His hands were shaking, not from pain, from rage. The kind of rage that burned cold instead of hot. The kind that didn't explode. It calcified, turned into purpose. "Your mother," he said quietly. "What happened to her?" Delphine's face crumpled. "Mr. Hopkins came to our apartment 3 nights ago. He was polite, said he needed to talk to her about a work matter. She told me to hide in my closet. I heard." Her voice broke. "I heard them talking. Then I heard a sound like something heavy falling. Then nothing. Mr. Hopkins left. I waited until morning. When I came out, she was gone, just gone, like she never existed." "But you had the locket." "She gave it to me the night before. She knew. She must have known they were coming." Delphine looked at the laptop. "Is it enough? The evidence? Can it stop them?" Yongsun thought about the names on that list, about the power they represented, about how many judges, prosecutors, and police commissioners would need to be clean for this evidence to matter. About how many weren't. In a fair system, yes, this would destroy them. He met her eyes. "But we're not in a fair system, we're in one they own. So we can't win." "I didn't say that." Yongsun's voice went cold. "I said the system won't help us, but there are other ways to fight a war." Di-young stepped forward. "Boss, you're talking about..." "Extermination." Yongsun's eyes stayed locked on the laptop. "Not justice, not law, just elimination of a threat." Now it wasn't business. It was extermination. "They're too powerful," H-Wang said quietly. "You go after them, they'll bury you. They'll bury everyone you've ever known." "Then I'll make sure I bury them first." Yongsun stood, ignoring the explosion of pain in his shoulder and ribs, ignoring H-Wang's protests, ignoring the rational voice that said this was suicide. "Di-young, the old network. How many soldiers can you mobilize? Ones who remember what we were before legitimacy." "Maybe 30, if they're willing to burn their lives for this." "They will be, once they see what's on this chip." "And then what? You kill Hopkins, his bosses will just replace him. You kill them, more will come. This is bigger than one organization, Hyung. This is systemic." "Then I'll be systematic." Yongsun turned to face his old lieutenant. "Hopkins wants a war, I'll give him one, but not the kind he's expecting. Not a gang war, not a street fight." His voice dropped. "A purge." Silence is the loudest sound in the world. "You're talking about killing 300 people, H-Wang said. "Prominent people, public figures." "I'm talking about killing 300 child traffickers," Yongsun corrected. "There's a difference." "The law. The law is on their side." Yongsun looked at Delphine, at the bruises still visible on her wrist, at the child who'd survived because she'd been smart and brave and desperate enough to ask a monster for help. "But I'm not." Delphine's small voice cut through the tension. "My mom used to say that violence just creates more violence." "Your mom was a good woman," Yongsun said gently, "but she's dead, and the men who killed her are still breathing, still selling children, still profiting from suffering." He knelt down, meeting Delphine's eyes. "I can't give you justice. The system's too broken for that, but I can give you something else." "What?" "Revenge." The word hung in the air like a blade. Delphine stared at him for a long moment, then, quietly, "Will it bring her back?" "No." "Will it save the other children?" Yongsun paused, thought about the facilities, the network, the infrastructure that would still exist even after Hopkins fell. "Not all of them," he admitted, "but some may be enough." "Then do it." Delphine's voice hardened with a resolution that shouldn't exist in a 7-year-old. "Stop them, however you can." Pain is just information. Yongsun stood, turning to Di-young. "Make the calls, everyone from the old days. Tell them the dragon of Seoul is awake. Tell them it's time to remember what we were before we pretended to be civilized." "This will start a war that could destroy the city," Di-young warned. The war already started, the moment Hopkins decided a child's life was worth less than his profit margin. Yongsun picked up the laptop, the evidence that could save thousands or get them all killed. "I'm just finishing it." Di-young nodded slowly, then pulled out his phone and began making calls. H-Wang gathered his medical supplies, shaking his head. "You're going to get yourself killed." "Probably." Yang-sun looked down at the bandages covering his shoulder, at the blood that had soaked through, at the body that had taken 3 bullets and kept standing because some things were worth dying for. But not today. He turned to Delphine. I need you to do something for me. What? Hide. Stay with people De-young trusts. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe. You're leaving me. I'm protecting you. What comes next? He stopped, thought about the violence he was about to unleash, the kind of brutality that made firefights look civilized. You don't need to see it. I've already seen worse. Not from me, you haven't. The most dangerous place in New York was within arm's reach of Cha Yang-sun. Delphine looked at him with those 2 old eyes, then quietly, promise you'll come back. I can't. Then promise you'll try. Yang-sun knelt down one more time, ignoring the screaming in his ribs. I promise I'll try, and I promise that when this is over, Hopkins and everyone like him will remember that some debts get paid in blood. Delphine hugged him, quick, fierce, then pulled back. Go, she whispered, make them pay. Yang-sun stood, looked at De-young. How many answered? 12 so far, more calling back. It'll have to be enough. Yang-sun moved toward the exit, each step an exercise in controlled agony. Tell them to meet me at the old warehouse, Pier 47, 1 hour. What are we doing? What we should have done from the beginning. Yang-sun opened the door, cold air rushing in from the street above. We're hunting. The demon of Seoul was awake. And it was hungry. 3 days. That's how long it took for Yang-sun's body to remember it wasn't 20 years old anymore. 3 days of fever dreams and wound care in H. Wang's underground clinic. 3 days of De-young's men rotating guard shifts, watching for Hopkins' hunters. 3 days of Delphine sleeping in the corner, waking up screaming every few hours, reaching for a mother who would never answer. 3 days of planning. On the 4th day, Yang-sun could stand without the world spinning. On the 5th, he could raise his right arm above his shoulder. On the 6th, he stopped bleeding through the bandages. On the 7th day, he sent the message. You sure about this? De-young stood behind the camera they'd set up in the basement. A simple setup, laptop webcam, decent lighting, nothing fancy. The message didn't need production value, just clarity. I'm sure. Yang-sun sat in the single chair they'd positioned against a bare concrete wall. No context, no location markers, just him and the camera and the truth about to be delivered. He wore the same suit from the restaurant, cleaned, but the bullet holes still visible in the shoulder. The blood stains still present despite H. Wang's attempts to wash them out. He wanted Hopkins to see the damage, wanted them all to see that 3 bullets hadn't been enough. Pain is just information. Recording, De-young said. Yang-sun looked into the camera. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who'd already made peace with what came next. My name is Cha Yang-sun. Some of you know me as the Dragon of Seoul. Some of you thought I died 3 days ago in Queens, bleeding out in a safe house while your men hunted a 7-year-old child. He paused, letting that image settle. I didn't die. I'm very much alive, and I have something that belongs to you. He held up the micro SD card, small enough to fit between his fingers. Meaningless to anyone who didn't know what it contained. A nuclear weapon to everyone who did. Catherine Martins was a good woman, a mother, a housekeeper who made the mistake of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. She saw what you are, what you do. She documented it, every transaction, every name, every child you sold like livestock. His voice stayed level, controlled. You killed her for it. You hunted her daughter. You tried to bury the evidence along with the witnesses. He set the chip down on the table beside him. You failed. Silence is the loudest sound in the world. This chip contains 15 years of your crimes, 347 names, 2,000 victims, enough evidence to put everyone in the Vanguard group and everyone who's done business with you in prison for the rest of your miserable lives. Yang-sun leaned forward slightly. Under normal circumstances, I'd take this to the authorities, the FBI, the DA, someone who cares about justice. He smiled, no warmth in it. But you own the authorities, don't you? Half of NYPD is on your payroll. Judges, prosecutors, federal agents. The system isn't broken. You bought it, piece by piece, until it works for you instead of the people it's supposed to protect. A wolf recognizes another wolf, even in sheep's wool. So I'm not going to the authorities. I'm going to handle this the old way. The way I used to handle problems before I tried to be civilized, before I convinced myself that men like me could become legitimate. His eyes went cold. You took that from me. You forced me to remember what I really am, and now you're going to learn what happens when you wake a sleeping dragon. He stood slowly, the movement deliberate despite the pain it caused. This message is going to everyone on that list. Every name, every accomplice, everyone who profited from selling children. You have 48 hours to disappear, leave the country, change your identity, run as far and as fast as you can. He picked up the chip again. Because in 48 hours, I'm releasing this evidence to every media outlet that isn't in your pocket, every foreign intelligence agency, every organization that might actually care. And while they're building their cases, while they're filing their warrants, while they're moving through the legal system you've corrupted. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I'll be coming for you myself. Blood washes off, regret stains forever. No trials, no appeals, no lawyers arguing technicalities, just elimination, systematic, thorough, permanent. Yang-sun moved closer to the camera. You wanted to make me choose between legitimacy and violence, between the businessman I was trying to become and the monster I used to be. Congratulations, you made the choice for me. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a traditional Korean blade, H-wando, the kind his grandfather had carried. 7 inches of folded steel, sharp enough to split silk falling across the edge. This is what I carried before I bought my first suit, before I learned that violence could be outsourced and profits could be legitimized and monsters could pretend to be men. He set the blade on the table beside the chip. I put it away because I thought I didn't need it anymore, because I thought the world had changed enough that strength without honor had become obsolete. His smile was predator-sharp. I was wrong. The world hasn't changed. It's just gotten better at hiding the blood. They woke the dragon. So here's what's going to happen. In 48 hours, the evidence goes public. Your lives end. Everything you built collapses. Your money won't save you. Your connections won't protect you. Your power becomes worthless. Yang-sun picked up the blade again, testing the weight. But if you want to stop that from happening, you know where to find me. Come get the chip. Come get the girl. Come finish what you started in Queens. He gave them an address, a warehouse on Pier 47, abandoned for a decade, perfect killing ground. Bring Hopkins, bring your security, bring everyone you've got. His voice went arctic. Because I'm bringing everyone I am, not the businessman, not the man who tried to go legitimate, the dragon, the enforcer, the thing you should have let stay sleeping. He leaned close to the camera, one last time. 48 hours. That's all the time you have left to be alive. I suggest you use it wisely. He reached out and stopped the recording. The basement went silent. Di-young lowered the camera slowly. That's a declaration of war, he said quietly. Yes. Against some of the most powerful people in the country. Yes. They'll come with everything. Police, private security, maybe even federal agents. Good. Yang-sun ejected the SD card from the camera, copying the video file. I want them all in one place. This is suicide, Hyung. No. Yang-sun looked at his lieutenant, at the man who'd followed him for 15 years through legitimacy and back into darkness. Suicide is giving up. This is evolution. I tried to be something I wasn't. Now I'm going back to what I am. He checked the exits. Bad habit, good instinct. Di-young uploaded the video from an anonymous server, routing it through enough proxies that tracking it would take days. Within an hour, it would be in every inbox that mattered. Every board member, every name on the list. Hopkins himself. While Di-young worked, Yang-sun moved to the corner where his old things waited. The suit came off first. Brioni, tailored, $10,000 of fabric that had stopped one bullet and soaked up enough blood to be unsalvageable anyway. He folded it carefully, respect for what it had represented, even if that representation was dead now. Underneath was the man he'd tried to bury. Scars, tattoos, a body that had been broken and rebuilt too many times to count. The magpie and tiger on his neck seemed more vivid now, like they'd been waiting to breathe again. He took off the Rolex. He didn't need to know the time anymore. Set it beside the folded suit, evidence of a life he'd tried to live, proof that he'd attempted redemption before the world reminded him that some stains don't wash off. From a duffel bag Di-young had brought, Yang-sun pulled out clothes he hadn't worn in a decade. Black cargo pants, combat boots, a long coat, traditional Korean style, reinforced with Kevlar panels, designed to move with a fighter instead of restricting him. The coat settled on his shoulders like an old friend, heavy, familiar, the weight of someone who'd given up pretending to be civilized. Weapons? Di-young asked. Yang-sun opened a case on the table. Inside, arranged with care, were blades. Not the H-wando from the video, that was for show. These were working tools, tactical knives, a karambit, something traditional his father had given him, folded steel blessed by monks who probably regretted it now. No guns, Di-young seemed surprised. Guns are loud, impersonal. They keep distance between you and what you're doing. Yang-sun selected 3 blades, testing their balance, checking edges that were sharp enough to part air. I want them to see my face when it happens. I want them to know exactly who killed them and why. The monster wasn't the man with the tattoos. He slid the blades into various sheaths, one at his belt, one in his boot, one in a shoulder rig under the coat. Old muscle memory taking over. The kind of preparation he used to do before every job, back when violence was his trade instead of his shame. Armor, Di-young held up a vest. No. Hyung, you're already shot to hell. If they hit me, they hit me. Yang-sun's voice carried a finality that killed the argument. I'm not going to that warehouse to survive. I'm going to make sure they don't. Delphine appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She stopped when she saw him. Yang-sun in the suit had been scary. Professional danger wearing expensive fabric. Yang-sun in the coat was something else. Something older. Something that had crawled out of Seoul's bloodiest alleys and learned that the only language power understood was violence. You look different, she whispered. I am different. Yang-sun knelt down so they were eye level. The man who saved you in the restaurant was trying to be good. The man you're looking at now has stopped trying. He's just going to be effective. Will you kill them, Mr. Hopkins and the others? Yes. No hesitation, no softening the truth. She'd earned honesty. My mom wouldn't want that, Delphine said quietly. She always said violence just makes more violence. Your mom was right, but she's dead, and the men who killed her are planning to do the same to you, to me, to anyone who threatens their profits. Yang-sun touched her shoulder gently. Sometimes the only way to stop violence is with more violence. It's not fair. It's just true. There are no innocent men in this room, except her. When it's over, Delphine asked, will you be okay? Yang-sun thought about that, about whether killing 300 people, even monsters who deserved it, would leave anything human inside him, whether crossing that line meant there was no coming back. Probably not, he admitted, but you will be, and that's enough. Delphine hugged him, quick, fierce, then pulled back. Don't die, she whispered. I'll try. She nodded, then returned to the corner where H-Wang was preparing food, leaving Yang-sun to his preparations. Di-young's phone buzzed. He checked it, then looked up. The video's been seen. Hopkins called an emergency board meeting. Our sources say they're mobilizing everything. Police, private contractors, maybe 50 men. Good, Yang-sun finished his weapons check. The more that come, the fewer are left to hurt children when I'm done. Hyung, 50 men. Is 49 too many and 1 too few? Yang-sun's voice carried the kind of certainty that made arguing pointless. I've fought worse odds, lost worse fights, survived things that should have killed me. He looked at Di-young. This is what I was before I tried to be legitimate, before I convinced myself that money could wash blood off my hands. This is the dragon of Seoul at full strength with nothing left to lose. Tonight, no one goes home. When do we leave? De-young asked. We don't. Yongsun picked up the H-wando from the table, sliding it into the final sheath at his back. You stay here, protect Delphine. If I don't come back, you get her somewhere safe, somewhere far from New York. Use the offshore accounts. New identity, new life. You're going alone, against 50 men. I'm going as myself, finally, completely, without pretending to be anything other than what I am. Yongsun moved toward the exit, each step deliberate, purposeful. And what I am is the thing that made grown men in Seoul cross the street when they saw me coming. The thing that built an empire on broken bones and fear. The thing Hopkins should have left sleeping. He stopped at the door, looked back at Delphine one last time. She was watching him with those two old eyes, understanding, maybe, that this was goodbye, that the man walking out this door might not be the one who walked back in. If anyone walked back in at all. For what it's worth, Yongsun said to her, your mother raised someone worth saving. That's not nothing. Then he opened the door and walked into the cold New York night. The city sprawled before him, glittering and corrupt, beautiful and poisonous. Somewhere out there, Hopkins was gathering his army. 50 men with guns and armor and the confidence that came from always winning. They had numbers, they had firepower, they had the law on their side. But Yongsun had rage and purpose and nothing left to lose. He pulled the coat tighter against the wind and started walking toward Pier 47. The Dragon of Seoul was going to war. And when it was over, the city would remember why they'd feared him in the first place. Yongsun didn't go to Pier 47. That warehouse was a trap, his trap, designed to draw Hopkins' army to a killbox where numbers meant nothing and violence was democracy. But sitting in the cold warehouse darkness, waiting for dawn and the inevitable assault, Yongsun had realized something fundamental. Hopkins wouldn't come. Men like Hopkins didn't risk themselves. They sent others to die while they watched from safety, making calls, moving pieces, treating human lives like chess figures that could be sacrificed without consequence. So Yongsun changed the game. Instead of waiting to be hunted, he became the hunter. The Vanguard building stood in Midtown Manhattan, 43 stories of steel and glass and corporate respectability. The kind of building where evil wore expensive suits and signed documents that destroyed lives in triplicate. Yongsun stood across the street at 2:47 a.m., watching the overnight security rotation through windows that cost more per square foot than most people's homes. 12 guards on the night shift, 4 in the lobby, 2 per every 10 floors, another 4 in the executive level, all of them trained, armed, and expecting trouble after the video Yongsun had sent. Getting in would be impossible. For a businessman. But the Dragon of Seoul had broken into more secure locations with worse odds and lived to brag about it. He checked the exits, bad habit, good instinct. Yongsun moved like smoke through the alley beside the building, finding the service entrance he'd memorized from blueprints De-young had acquired. No cameras here. Budget cuts meant the shadows had blind spots, and men who trafficked children apparently didn't think to guard the garbage. The lock was commercial grade, would take a professional 10 minutes. Yongsun had it open in 90 seconds. The building's guts were ugly, concrete corridors, exposed pipes, the bones beneath the skin of corporate respectability. He moved through maintenance tunnels that janitors used, avoiding the main hallways where security cameras tracked every angle. Up the service stairs, silent, his boots barely whispered against concrete, 20 years of trying to forget how to move like a predator, and his body remembered in minutes. A wolf recognizes another wolf, even in sheep's wool. 15th floor. He emerged from the stairwell into a corridor that smelled of expensive carpet and air conditioning. Empty. The after-hours silence of a building that pretended to sleep while evil stayed awake. Security office was 2 floors up. He needed to pass it or neutralize it. Yongsun chose neither. Instead, he triggered the fire alarm on the 17th floor. The building erupted in sound, klaxons, automated announcements, the chaos of emergency protocols activating. Guards would respond, leaving their posts, following procedures that made sense for fires but created gaps for ghosts. He moved during the confusion, climbing stairs while security descended, passing them in the chaos like a shadow that didn't register until too late. 39th floor, executive level, where the real monsters lived. The hallway was different here, art on the walls, names on doors with titles that meant power. CFO, COO, board members, and at the end, the corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows and a nameplate that read, Jeffrey Hopkins, VP Risk Management. Risk management, corporate euphemism for cleaning up messes that threatened profit margins. Euphemism for making children disappear. The door was locked. Yongsun didn't bother picking it. He kicked it open, the frame splintering, the sound lost in the fire alarm's chaos. Hopkins sat at his desk, phone to his ear, mid-sentence in what sounded like coordinating the response to a perceived threat at Pier 47. He looked up, saw Yongsun standing in his doorway, coat dark as spilled oil, face carrying the promise of violence. Hopkins' hand moved toward the desk drawer where smart men kept insurance. Don't, Yongsun said quietly. Hopkins froze, not from fear, from calculation. His eyes swept the office, exits, weapons, angles of attack, the same assessment Yongsun had made entering. You're supposed to be at the warehouse, Hopkins said calmly, setting down the phone. His hand stayed visible. We have 50 men headed there. I know, that's why I'm here. Understanding flickered across Hopkins' face. You sent them away on purpose. You wouldn't have come. Yongsun stepped into the office, closing what remained of the door behind him. Men like you never risk themselves. You send others to die, make calls from safety, treat violence like a commodity you purchase instead of commit. That's called civilization. That's called cowardice. The most dangerous place in New York was within arm's reach of Cha Yongsun. Hopkins stood slowly, his movements controlled. He was in shirt sleeves, the first time Yongsun had seen him without the suit jacket. Underneath, Hopkins was lean, athletic, the build of someone who maintained physical conditioning even behind a desk. You're hurt, Hopkins observed, noting how Yongsun favored his left side. 3 bullets, cracked ribs, you shouldn't even be standing. And yet, you know this accomplishes nothing. Hopkins moved away from the desk, creating distance. You kill me, Vanguard replaces me. You release the evidence, we have lawyers who'll tie it up in courts for decades. You think you're fighting monsters, but you're fighting a system. Systems don't die when one man does. No, Yongsun's hand moved to the blade at his belt, not drawing it, just touching, a promise. But they bleed. Pain is just information. Hopkins' stance shifted. Subtle, professional, the way someone trained to fight adjusts their weight before violence begins. Corporate security training, Yongsun asked. Executive protection specialist, 8 years before Vanguard. Hopkins smiled without humor. I'm not some soft administrator, Cha, I've put down threats before. Threats, that's what you call a 7-year-old child. I call her a liability, there's a difference. The fire alarm cut off. Sudden silence that made the air pressure change. In the distance, security teams would be returning to positions, realizing the alarm was false, beginning to understand that someone had used it as cover. Time was running out. Last chance, Hopkins said. Walk away. We'll forget the video, forget the girl. We'll even renegotiate your merger if you want legitimacy that badly. You can go back to pretending to be civilized. I tried that. Yongsun's hand tightened on the blade's handle. You took it from me. Then you die here. Hopkins reached behind his back, pulling a tactical baton from a belt holster, extended it with a snap of his wrist. You're injured, exhausted. You've already lost. Maybe, Yongsun drew the blade, 7 inches of folded steel that caught the city lights through the window. Let's find out. Hopkins moved first. Professional, trained. The baton came in fast at Yongsun's injured shoulder, targeting the wound, trying to incapacitate. Yang-sun slipped the strike by inches, his body moving on instinct that 20 years of desk work hadn't killed. He countered low, blade tracking toward Hopkins' thigh. Hopkins blocked with the baton, metal on metal, then pivoted, throwing an elbow toward Yang-sun's cracked ribs. Connection, Yang-sun's vision whited out. Pain exploded through his torso like lightning. He stumbled back, gasping. Hopkins pressed the advantage. 2 quick strikes, head, then knee, textbook, efficient. The way they taught executive protection specialists to neutralize threats without permanent damage. But Yang-sun wasn't a threat to be neutralized. He was a dragon that had stopped pretending to be human. The suit was ruined. The soul was clean. The knee strike came in. Yang-sun caught it, pivoting with Hopkins' momentum, using the man's own strength to throw him into the desk. Hopkins hit hard, the expensive wood cracking. Papers and computer equipment scattered. Hopkins rolled off, faster than expected, the baton coming in again. This time Yang-sun didn't block. He moved inside the strike, past Hopkins' guard, into the pocket where batons were useless and training became liability. Yang-sun's elbow connected with Hopkins' temple, not hard enough to kill, hard enough to ring bells and compromise balance. Hopkins staggered, dropped the baton, reached for the gun at his ankle. Yang-sun kicked it away, sent the weapon skittering under a filing cabinet. "No," he said quietly, "we finish this honestly." Hopkins' laugh was sharp. "Honestly, you're a criminal, a gangster, you've killed dozens of people." "Yes," Yang-sun circled, blade held low. "But I never pretended to be anything else. I never hid behind words like risk management and inventory. I never sold children and called it business. The difference being, I own what I am. There are no innocent men in this room, except her." Hopkins lunged, fast, desperate, going for Yang-sun's injured shoulder again, trying to use pain as leverage. But pain was just information, and Yang-sun had learned to ignore information that didn't matter. He sidestepped, blade flashing, not a killing blow, a message written in blood across Hopkins' forearm. Shallow, painful, proof that this fight had only one ending. Hopkins backed away, gripping his arm, blood welled between his fingers. "You can't win, even if you kill me, the system." "You keep talking about the system," Yang-sun advanced slowly. "Like it's some eternal truth, but systems are built by people, and people bleed." He moved again. This time Hopkins tried to block, but corporate training was failing against street experience. Yang-sun's blade found Hopkins' thigh, deeper this time, the kind of cut that made standing difficult. Hopkins dropped to one knee. His face was pale, slick with sweat. "Wait." "For what? For you to offer another deal? Another compromise?" Yang-sun stood over him, blade ready. "You hunted a child, you killed her mother. You tried to bury evidence of 2,000 children sold like livestock. What deal balances that equation?" "You bought the law," Yang-sun said, "but you can't buy me." Hopkins looked up at him, and for the first time, beneath the corporate polish and professional mask, Yang-sun saw real fear. "Please," Hopkins whispered, "I have a daughter, a son there." "The children you sold had families too." Yang-sun's blade moved. Quick, precise, not the theatrical violence of movies, just the practical elimination of a problem that couldn't be solved any other way. Hopkins' eyes went wide, his mouth opened, but only blood came out. He fell backward, slowly, like a building collapsing in reverse. His expensive watch caught the city lights through the window. His wedding ring glinted on his left hand. A father, a husband, a man with a life and family and probably some good qualities buried under the monster he'd become. But also a man who'd sold children for profit. And some debts get paid in blood. Gravity always wins. Yang-sun knelt beside Hopkins' dying body, watched the light fade from his eyes, watched the final calculation running behind them, the realization that money and power and connections meant nothing when facing the one thing they couldn't buy. "For Catherine Martins," Yang-sun said quietly, And for every child whose name you erased. Hopkins' hand twitched once, reaching for something that wasn't there, then went still. Yong-sun stood. His blade was clean. He'd wiped it on Hopkins' expensive shirt. The irony wasn't lost on him. Blood on Italian fabric. The cost of civilization measured in stains. Behind him, the elevator dinged. Security, finally understanding the threat wasn't at Pier 47, finally coming to protect their employer. Too late. Yong-sun moved to the window, 43 stories up. Manhattan sprawled below like a circuit board, lights marking the arteries where money and power flowed. Where corruption lived behind glass and steel. The door burst open, 4 guards, weapons drawn. Freeze. Yong-sun turned slowly, looked at them, at their young faces and determined expressions, men doing a job, protecting evil because the paycheck cleared. He's dead, Yong-sun said simply. Your boss, the man who signed your checks, the man who trafficked children and called it risk management, he's dead, and everyone like him is next. The guards looked at Hopkins' body, at the blood pooling on the expensive carpet, at the dragon of souls standing in the corner office like death had taken human form. Drop the weapon, the lead guard shouted. Yong-sun smiled, no warmth in it. No, he said. Then he went through the window. Not jumping, controlled fall, the way he'd practiced in Seoul when buildings were obstacles instead of boundaries. The coat spread like wings. His hand caught the ledge 1 floor down, momentum transferring, body swinging through the next window in a controlled crash that was more calculation than desperation. 38th floor, empty cubicles, darkness. Yong-sun rolled through the broken glass, already moving, already running. Above him, guards were shouting. Below him, more security was mobilizing. But he'd done what he came for. Hopkins was dead, the head removed, the organization wounded. Not destroyed, not yet. But bleeding. And Yong-sun had a list of 346 more names who needed to understand what happened when you made a dragon choose between legitimacy and revenge. He hit the stairs running, disappearing into the building's shadows like smoke, leaving behind only blood and broken glass and the corpse of a man who'd thought power made him immortal. It hadn't. And the others on that list would learn the same lesson soon enough. The hunt had only just begun. 6 months later. The apartment didn't look like a safe house. It looked like a home. Not luxury, Yong-sun had learned that expensive things attracted the wrong kind of attention, but comfortable. A 2-bedroom in Brooklyn, the kind of neighborhood where people minded their business and looked out for each other in equal measure. Where a man with neck tattoos and a young daughter didn't warrant a second glance. Delphine sat at the kitchen table doing homework. Real homework, from a real school, under a real name that existed in databases that wouldn't crumble under scrutiny. Di-young had connections, people who specialized in creating identities for those who needed to disappear. Delphine Martins had died in Queens 6 months ago, a footnote in a gang war the media had stopped covering after the first week. Emma Cha had been born in her place, 8 years old, adopted daughter of Charles Cha, a security consultant who'd recently relocated from California. The paperwork was flawless: birth certificate, medical records, school transcripts from a private academy that had conveniently burned down 3 years ago, destroying all physical records but leaving the digital footprint intact. A life built on lies that were more honest than the truth. I don't get this one, Delphine Emma said, pointing at her math worksheet. It says to show my work, but I already know the answer. Show it anyway, Yong-sun said from the stove, where he was attempting to cook something that approximated dinner. Teachers need to see the process, not just the result. That's dumb. Yes, but necessary. The tattoos didn't vanish, but they meant something else now. Yong-sun had kept them all, the magpie, the tiger, the characters that marked him as someone from Seoul's underworld. But now, when people saw them, they saw a father picking up his daughter from school, a man at parent-teacher conferences, Someone who volunteered for the school's security committee and made the PTA mothers uncomfortable in ways they couldn't quite articulate but didn't quite fear. The Dragon of Seoul had become something stranger than a legitimate businessman or a criminal kingpin. He'd become a dad. "Is it ready yet?" Delphine asked, sniffing the air. "It smells interesting." Interesting good or interesting bad? Interesting like I should have cereal instead. Yongsun laughed, actually laughed. The sound still felt foreign in his throat, like a language he was relearning after decades of disuse. "It's bulgogi, my grandmother's recipe." He plated the food, bringing it to the table. "Or as close as I can get without her threatening to disown me for ruining it." Delphine took a tentative bite, her eyes widened. "This is actually good." "You sound surprised." "You almost burned the kitchen down making toast last week." "That was the toaster's fault." "The toaster you threw out the window." "It was being disrespectful." "Pain is just information." They ate in comfortable silence. Outside, Brooklyn moved through its evening rhythm, kids playing basketball in the street, neighbors arguing in 3 different languages, the distant wail of sirens that no longer made Yongsun reach for weapons he kept hidden under the floorboards. The city had moved on. Hopkins' death had been ruled a gang hit, connected to Yongsun's death in Queens. The investigation had stalled within weeks, buried under more immediate crimes and cases that prosecutors could actually win. The evidence chip had been released, anonymously, through channels that couldn't be traced. Multiple copies to multiple agencies. FBI, Interpol, every major news outlet that wasn't in Vanguard's pocket. The fallout had been spectacular. 3 senators resigned. 2 committed suicide before federal marshals could arrest them. Vanguard Group's stock had crashed. The CEO faced indictment on 47 counts. The network of fake orphanages and adoption agencies had collapsed, revealing the infrastructure that had stolen 2,000 lives. Not all the names on the list faced justice. Some had too much power. Too many connections, lawyers good enough to turn evidence into reasonable doubt. But enough had fallen. Enough had been exposed. Enough had learned that some secrets, once revealed, devoured everything around them. A father is just a man who stands between a child and the dark. "Did you see the news?" Delphine asked quietly, pushing food around her plate. "About the trial, the Vanguard people." "I saw. They're saying Mr. Hopkins was murdered by a rival gang, that you're dead, that I died in the crossfire." "Yes." "Does that bother you, being dead?" Yongsun considered the question. Cha Yongsun, the Dragon of Seoul, the man who'd tried to go legitimate, the criminal who'd made one last choice that cost everything, was dead, buried in paperwork and closed cases and a city that had already forgotten his name. Charles Cha, security consultant and single father, was someone else entirely. "No," he said finally, "being dead is the freest I've ever been." Delphine nodded slowly. Then, "Do you miss it? Your old life, the money, the power, being important?" He checked the exits. Bad habit, good instinct. Yongsun looked around the apartment. At the crayon drawings stuck to the refrigerator with magnets. At the backpack by the door with her school books. At the life they'd built in the shadows of the life he'd destroyed. "I miss thinking I could be someone I wasn't," he admitted. "I miss believing that enough money would wash my hands clean. But the actual life, the deals and the meetings and the pretending," he met her eyes. "No, that wasn't freedom. That was a different kind of prison. And this. This is enough." It was the truth. Not the whole truth. He still woke some nights reaching for weapons that weren't there, still saw Hopkins' face in crowds, still felt the weight of 346 names he hadn't managed to reach. But it was enough truth for now. "There are no innocent men in this room, except her." "Di-Young called," Yongsun said, changing the subject. "He wants to know if you're still planning to take that coding class." "The one at the community center." "Yeah." Delphine's face lit up. "Can I, really?" "If your grades stay up." "They will, I promise." She was already mentally cataloging the projects she'd build. The girl who'd been sold as merchandise had discovered she was brilliant with computers, had a natural talent for systems and security that made Di-young joke she'd be running her own syndicate by 20. Yang-sun suspected he wasn't entirely joking. "There's one condition," Yang-sun said. Delphine's excitement dimmed slightly. "What?" "You use what you learn to help people, not to hurt them, not for profit, not even for revenge." His voice carried the weight of someone who'd learned this lesson in blood. "Promise me." Delphine looked at him with those two old eyes that had seen things no child should see, that had survived things that would have broken most adults. "I promise," she said. "I'll be better than they were." "You already are." The monster wasn't the man with the tattoos. After dinner, Delphine went to her room to finish homework. Yang-sun cleaned the kitchen, washing dishes that 6 months ago he wouldn't have believed he'd be washing. His phone buzzed. Encrypted message from Di-young, another request. "Domestic situation, woman and 2 kids, husbands connected, can you help?" Yang-sun had rebuilt his organization after Hopkins. Not back into legitimacy, that bridge was burned and he'd burned it himself, but into something else. Something that existed in the space between law and chaos. A protection service for people the system had failed. Battered women whose abusers had badges. Children whose parents sold them. Immigrants being exploited by the same criminal networks Yang-sun used to compete with. The kind of work that didn't pay well but paid in other ways. The tattoos didn't vanish, but they meant something else now. He texted back, "Send details, I'll handle it." "Dad," Delphine's voice from her room. "Dad," the word still hit different every time. Still felt like stolen valor from men who'd earned it the normal way, through biology and normalcy and lives that didn't include body counts. "Yeah. Can you help me with this history question?" Yang-sun moved to her doorway. She sat on her bed, textbook open, chewing her pencil the way she did when concentrating. "What's the question?" "It's asking about moral choices in war, like when is violence justified? I don't." She stopped, looked at him, at the man who'd killed to save her, who'd destroyed his future to give her one. "I don't know how to answer it." Silence is the loudest sound in the world. Yang-sun sat on the edge of her bed, thought about all the violence he'd committed, all the bodies he'd left behind, all the choices that had led him from Seoul's gutters to a Brooklyn apartment where a child called him dad. "Write this," he said finally. "Violence is never good, but sometimes it's necessary. The question isn't whether violence is justified, it's whether you can live with yourself after, whether the thing you protected was worth the cost of protecting it." Delphine wrote carefully, then looked up. "Can you live with yourself?" "I'm trying." Yang-sun touched her shoulder gently. "Every day I'm trying." "Is it working?" He thought about Hopkins dying on that office floor, about Minho's car exploding, about the names on the list he'd never reach, the children he'd never save, the system he'd barely scratched. But then he thought about Delphine. Safe, alive, doing homework in a bedroom that was hers, in a home that was theirs, in a life that was real even if it was built on lies. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I think it is." She smiled, actually smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her in 6 months. "Good," she returned to her homework, "because you're not allowed to give up. We have a deal." "What deal?" "You protect me from the monsters. I protect you from being one." She said it matter-of-factly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "That's how family works, right? A wolf recognizes another wolf, even in sheep's wool." Yang-sun felt something crack in his chest, not breaking, healing, the kind of pain that meant something frozen was finally thawing. "Yeah," he managed, "that's how family works." He left her to finish her homework, returned to the kitchen, sat at the table where they'd eaten dinner like normal people living normal lives. The window showed Brooklyn at night, lights in apartments where other families were eating, arguing, laughing, living, existing in the mundane miracle of not being hunted. 6 months ago, Yongsun had been seconds away from a toast that would have legitimized everything he'd built. 6 months ago, he'd been about to become exactly what he'd spent 20 years working toward. Then a little girl in a pink dress had grabbed his hand and whispered, "Please pretend you're my dad." And everything had changed. The merger was dead. The $1 billion was gone. The legitimate future had burned like so much paper. But sitting in a Brooklyn apartment, listening to Delphine humming while she did homework, Yongsun realized something fundamental. He'd gotten exactly what he wanted, just not in the way he'd expected. Not legitimacy, not redemption, not absolution for 20 years of violence. But purpose, direction, a reason to wake up that wasn't about profit or power or pretending to be something he wasn't. A reason that mattered. Blood washes off, regret stains forever. His phone buzzed again. Another request. Another person the system had failed who needed someone willing to operate outside it. Yongsun typed his response, planning the logistics, assembling the resources, doing the math of violence that he'd never stopped being good at. But this time, the violence had a purpose beyond profit. This time, it meant something. "Hey, Dad," Delphine appeared in the kitchen doorway, homework finished. "Can we watch a movie?" "What movie?" "I don't know, something with a happy ending." Yongsun smiled. "We can do that." They settled on the couch, the second-hand one Di-young had found, comfortable in the way expensive furniture never was. Delphine leaned against his uninjured side, already half asleep before the opening credits finished. Outside, sirens wailed. The city moved through its nightly violence. People hurt each other in ways large and small. The system failed new victims every hour. But in this apartment, in this moment, there was peace. Fragile, temporary, built on foundations that would collapse under any serious scrutiny. But real. "Pass the salt, Dad," Delphine mumbled, already dreaming, not making sense, but calling him Dad anyway. And Cha Yongsun, the dragon of Seoul, the monster who tried to become a man, the man who'd become a father, realized that sometimes redemption didn't look like clean hands and legitimate businesses. Sometimes it looked like a child sleeping safe on a second-hand couch. Sometimes it looked like choosing who to protect over who to profit from. Sometimes it looked like accepting what you were and finding a way to make it mean something. The tattoos didn't vanish, but they meant something else now. The violence didn't stop, but it had purpose now. The monster didn't die, but it learned who to hunt. And that, Yongsun thought as Delphine's breathing deepened into sleep, was close enough to a happy ending for men like him. Close enough,